He wants you to do it. Let's do it. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah. We're behind you.
Alhamdulillah. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. We ask Allah, God's protection from satanic thoughts and influences, or ungodly, unnatural thoughts and influences. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. With Allah's name and signature permission, or signs in nature, most merciful benefactor, most merciful redeemer. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. All praise belongs to Allah, God, the creator, evolver, sustainer, and ruler over all systems of knowledge, over all that exists. Rahmanir Rahim, the most merciful benefactor, the most merciful redeemer. Malik Yawmiddin, master, supreme judge over the day of judgment, a day or time of reflection and separation. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Only you we worship with our continuous devoted focus, attention, and ask for help. Ihdina siratal mustaqim. Guide and keep us on the straight upward path. Siratal ladhina an'amta alayhim ghayril maghdubi alayhim waladdallin. The straight upward path of those you favor, approve of, not those who embrace and use anger or go far, far away from remembering you. Sadaqallahu azim. Allah, God, speaks the ultimate pure truth. Thank you.
Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Alhamdulillah. That was really insightful. Alhamdulillah.
Shukran, shukran. Thank you so much, brother. Thank you so much.
SubhanAllah, it was beautiful.
Assalamu alaikum to you all. Can you hear me loudly and clearly?
Yes, indeed.
Salam alaikum.
Very good. Thank you. I'm going to ask our senior instructor, Ahmed Hassan, to just give us maybe another 2 minutes worth of introductory remarks concerning NuNetics, and we'll be ready to start, inshallah.
Alhamdulillah. I recorded something that we could all benefit from. Actually, I decided to take the NuNetics book and record the basics of the system, you know, the 3 levels, right? What A means, Aleph means, what Ba means, you know. So I recorded it, and I'll just play some of it, and well, tell me what you think. This is a condensed audio version of the NuNetics book, authored by international instructor Benjamin Bilal. Aleph. In the body, it represents the spine connected to the skull. Aleph in the environment represents a vertical column, any pillar sturdy enough to uphold or support a structure. Aleph in the abstract means a covenant or agreement. Ba, or bait. In the body, it represents the abdomen, more specifically the bowels or guts. Bait or Ba is also represented in the testicles. Ba in the environment represents any container in which groups of people or things are placed, which will eventually be emptied out and replaced. Ba in the abstract means in and with. Bait also means any two attached entities. which eventually split into opposite and although complementary parts. Ta. Ta in the body represents the hair when groomed, cut, or plucked, whether the hair is connected to the scalp, face, or body. Ta in the environment represents a tie or tether. It represents any two things which exist independently, yet are connected to each other. Ta in the abstract can be compared to hair, which because it is subrooted can only be felt beneath the surface of the skin. The conscious mind is analogous to the hair above the skin, which causes no pain when combed out. Likewise, sensitivities and emotions reside in the subconscious and can be manipulated, causing intense emotional pain in the same way that pulling the hair causes discomfort beneath the scalp. Tha. Tha represents the hair also, but hair which is loose, unmanaged, and multiplied. Tha in the environment represents any entities of three or more, any multiples that are perceived as one: sand on the shore, leaves on the trees, soil in the garden, etc. Or one thing that can produce many, especially in large numbers. Tha is anything which amasses, such as stockpiles, surpluses, etc. Tha in the abstract means accumulations, gatherings, increases, things that are plural, luxuriant, thick, profuse, anything cultivated. Jeem. Jeem represents the legs, the knees, and the feet, especially when moving towards water. Jeem in the environment represents walking. It is the motion of entities toward a central goal, the congregating of any group which shares the same objective. In the abstract, it's found in the Quranic words Jannah and Gehenna, which means paradise and hell, fire, respectively. Gene is also consonantally connected to the English word gym. Gym period in school usually involves the movement of many legs during the course of its activities. The letter J in gene by itself means legs and feet. The elongated E sound means stretching or moving outwards. In this case, Jeem with the M sound on the end means moving towards water. Ha, the heavy, ha. In the body, represents the arms when embracing, surrounding, and protecting. Ha also signifies heavy breathing. Ha in the environment represents any heavily reinforced fence or protecting wall. Ha in the abstract represents healthy, abundant, and quickened spiritual consciousness. Kha. Kha represents the arms as well, but when failing to protect. Kha is using the arms to seize and detain. Kha in the environment means to disarm or to neutralize something by removing its advantage. Kha in the abstract means to yield or surrender, create an obstacle, abandon, disappoint. Dao. Dao in the body represents the firmly rooted tooth, denoting something hard, inserted into a foundation which is not easily removed. Example, the hardness and durability of the tooth. Dao in the Dao in the environment means a door, firmly hinged. Dal in the abstract is a passage from the known into the unknown. In this regard, Dal represents a partial mystery. Thou, it represents a tooth also, but a tooth which is loose or removed. In the environment, thou represents any state of commotion or fluctuation. Thou in the abstract, something which draws the attention in the way that open doors or loose or missing tooth would. I think that's about 2 minutes, so I'll just stop it there. Instructor, is that enough?
That's enough for me. Is it enough for you learners? Feel free to give him your reactions to his independently recorded explanation of many of those Fitra Arabic letters. Feel free to give him your comments.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah, that was good work. That was a good presentation.
Thank you, brother.
Anyone else care to comment?
That sounded fantastic to me. It makes it so that it breaks things down even finer for those who may seem to have some kind of challenge in perceiving what's being shared in the book. That's great.
Thank you, sister.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Ahmed, that's a great presentation. I like the connections, and hey, can't get no better than that.
Oh, I beg to differ. We're gonna get better, inshallah. We're gonna get better. We're trying to catch up with the international instructor. I don't know if we're gonna catch him. We're gonna try anyway.
Alhamdulillah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Hello.
Wa alaikum salam.
Go right ahead. Someone else wanted to comment? Okay.
I will. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam. You went mute. Unmute your phone.
I think it's a good idea to have it recorded. Some people learn visually by actually looking and reading in a book or on a sheet of paper, and some learn better by listening. Have auditory type learning ability more so than visual. So I think it's an excellent idea, and it reinforces. It reinforces when you can see something and hear it at the same time. The more of your five senses you use in learning process, the deeper the learning, the more permanent the learning. So excellent idea. Great job, brother.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alhamdulillah.
The last thing I would like to say is that our listening vocabulary is greater than our speaking vocabulary. So this gives us an opportunity to turn them seed letters into root words into branches of knowledge. I think you started off. It's going to be something that we're going to need to continue, and appreciate your effort for coming out on point. So you can be, little criticized or whatever, but you standing there and stand on your own, doing what you needed to do, is an example for us to do the same. More.
Alhamdulillah.
Shukran jazilan.
Okay, and I think that's sufficient. And you're absolutely right. This is for purposes of constructive criticism and for understanding where it is I want the majority of the NuNetics learners to begin journeying towards. I want all of you to be able to take what's in the books, take what's in your notes, and begin to do audio recordings of these. And the best of them are going to end up being published by NuNetics Institute. And I think you're going to really enjoy your work once you've heard it. I'm sure that when Ahmed began recording, he may have had some trepidation and some hesitation, but me listening to it was just so pleasurable. I know there are mistakes and gaps and what do they call them? Gaffaws. I don't know what they call these things, these little mistakes that we make when we pronounce things, but that's what editing is for. So I was actually editing in my mind as I was listening to his recording, and I think he did an excellent job.
The
A
word
very
would be
excellent job.
Thank you. Thank you. Alhamdulillah.
Winona, you were saying?
The word may be gaffes.
Gaffs, yeah. Yeah, gaffaw is like a chuckle, isn't it?
No, the gaff that you were referring to is a small mistake, a mistake that might be inadvertent.
Yes. Don't you love it? Oh, I love these corrections. Makes me feel so proud. Y'all remember now, I'm just a high school graduate. Y'all got to cut me some slack. All right.
That's not working anymore, man.
Well, that's not working. You know, I said that for the
We're you students.
All right. And you know what's beautiful is that we have so many degreed people who are with us now, PhD, double masters, and all kinds of wonderful elevations in education that are with us on a regular basis. And that's a wonderful sign from Allah that we're headed in the right direction and that what we're doing can be academically justified now. This is not me talking to any stupid people or people who I can just say anything to. And I think that that is a wonderful and a powerful sign from Allah that He is advancing us and He's giving us the exact right company. If I can get away with that phrase, exact right company. I'm waiting for Winona to correct that. But it's just a wonderful journey that we're on, is really all I want to say. My heart is full right now with what I'm hearing coming from many of you. Some of you present these things to me in private. Some of you are allowed to make them public. And where we're going to be in the next 6 months, I can almost guarantee you it's going to be something that all of us are going to be proud of as individuals and as a collective. So stay tuned and study hard. Now, with that said, I'm going to pull up my notes. Give me just one moment. Okay, sound is much better. That's good to know. All right. And if you have any questions about what's being said along the way, just put it into the chat if you're on your computer. If you're on your phone and you're not on a computer, then inshallah, if we have time at the end of the class, we'll take a few questions. Okay. So this, as you know, is going to be part 2 to the spellbind, to the, what's the name of my lesson here? What's the name of my lesson? My goodness.
Spellcasters.
Spellcasters. I was waiting on Winona for that one. Yes, but you know, it's a word that I don't usually use. So it just falls out of my head when I'm not using it. And I'm not looking at my notes to remind me, but it's a very powerful concept that has been invented by the spellcasters, AKA the social and spiritual manipulators. And if we want to put another AKA in there from the Quran, we can simply say Ash-Shaytan Irajim, the rejected Satan. That's who we're talking about. We're not talking about spooks and spirits that we can't see. We're talking about people who occupy human flesh and blood, just like we do, but their internal life has been dedicated to wrongdoing, to evil, to manipulation, etc. So let me pull up these notes and get this righteous party started. And greetings once again to everyone. Thank you for being with us on this 20th evening of March 2022. I am your international instructor, Benjamin Bilal, And again, if you're just joining us, thank you for being here and being here on time. And if you missed last week's class, then it's available as we speak on YouTube. All you have to do is Google Imam Benjamin Bilal, and you'll see whatever the latest video is that we put up available for you on that channel. I would advise you while you're there, and if you're listening to this on YouTube, if I choose to put it up on YouTube, then please like and subscribe. And this way, every time a new video is put up, you will be alerted. And you won't have to wait until the next weekend or the next class to find out that there is a video up. And we say alhamdulillah, because these videos are going up and we're getting several hundred people every day or so who are listening and sharing. It's very important that you like and subscribe and share these videos, because it helps the algorithm to reach that many more people who were not aware of what it is we're doing. Okay, so don't take it lightly that we ask you to like and subscribe to these videos. It's very important for the algorithm and for people way outside of our circle to be alerted as to what we're doing, because it then is shared with other people who are doing like subjects. And that's very, very important for where it is we need to go. So thank you for that. And inshallah, Habiba or one of you others will remind me again at the end of this discourse to repeat that message about liking and subscribing. I'm the worst person in the world to promote my own material. Most of you know that already. So I need you guys who are conscious of the importance of that to remind me. So thank you for that in advance. We're going to begin by talking about the importance of attention. The importance of attention. Anytime you see TEN in a word, it's going to have something to do with that which stretches out and expands. Just like the number 10 in the number system stretches out and expands the number system after it has reached the number 9, which is actually the completion of all of the numbers. From 0 to 9 represents the completion of our number system. Everything else after 9 is a stretch. 10 is just 1 being repeated. 11 is just 2 being repeated. 12, 1 and 2 is 3 being repeated. It's being stretched out to its limits. So anytime you see 10, even in this word tent, you know, in order to put a tent up, you put up its props, you put up its pillars, you put up its middle pillar, and then you take the material of the tent and you begin to stretch it across the 4 points in order to establish it in the ground. So again, anything you're talking tension, just put any word that has 10 in your mind, and you're going to see that it has to do with that which is stretched or expanded. So we're talking right now about the importance of attention, because attention in the human being is what is actually being manipulated by these spellcasters. The way their spells are casted is by being able to manipulate human attention. You've heard of stretching your imagination. Well, this is what they do. The only difference between what nature does in stretching your imagination, when you look out and see all of the beautiful fields of flowers and trees and animals and insects and so forth, nature has its own natural way of stretching your attention. But the manipulators stretch your attention in a very different way. Listen carefully. The manipulators first create your imagination. They give you an imagination. They give you the things that they want your imagination to wrap around and be expanded upon. That's the difference. How do we know? Look at the average television show that is directed towards our children, with the number 1, at least it used to be number 1, being Sesame Street. Do you see anything real on Sesame Street? Have you seen a 6'7" yellow bird walking and talking and dancing and kicking up his legs down the street with your children? Have you seen that? No. Have you seen a Cookie Monster in your garbage can outside? No. Have you seen Dracula? You know, I mean, have you seen all of these characters in real life? No. That means that the social manipulators have taken it upon themselves to create fiction, to create non-reality for your imagination to be situated upon. Allah creates reality for your mind to be situated upon and expanded upon. But the social manipulators, I repeat, they give you fictitious characters in order for you to begin growing the initial mind. This is an important point. They give you non-reality to begin the sojourn that Allah has put the human mind upon, so that as the mind begins to grow, as the person begins to evolve, what they have situated their thinking faculties upon is non-reality. And that's why it's very easy to accept non-reality in your older years. When you get married, you have unreal expectations because your imagination is not in accord with the fitrah. Your imagination is in accord with what they told you marriage is supposed to be. Once upon a time and forever, you know, in love forever and all of that stuff that they give you. And when you finally get into those areas of concern, you find out that they are not all what you were taught they were supposed to be. We're taught certain things about our parents, unfortunately. In today's world of children's television, they make the average cartoon parent an idiot. Just a straight up idiot. And the children are telling them what to do. You've seen this. I don't have to explain this. I don't have to convince you of this. You've seen this. So we want to develop a strategy to help bring our human minds back to their human-based foundations. And the first thing we need to do is pay attention to what we are paying attention to. Whatever you give your attention to, I repeat, it expands. And in the world of magicians, the most popular word amongst spellcasters and magicians and presto changeo type people, the most repeated word and popular word is abracadabra. I've spoken about this. This is for the sake of new people. Abracadabra is actually a Hebrew word. And it means, quote, I speak and therefore I create. Abra means I speak, and kadabra means therefore I create. Now I'm going to break this down just a little bit more for you. The word abra is a Hebrew word, and it coincides with the very word Hebrew. Let's look at this so that you'll understand. We have the word Hebrew. And Hebrew is to be broken down where the H and E separated from the B-R-E-W. This H-E is called a definite article. In Arabic, this would be A-L, like we say al-kitab, the book. H-E for Hebrew, for the Hebrew language, is there, the. So this would be, if we translated it into English, the whatever brew is. That's what Hebrew is. It is the whatever brew is. And what does brew mean? Brew represents a crossing over from one side of something to the opposite side of that thing. So Hebrew is the crossing over. You heard of the Jewish holiday called the Passover. It's the same concept. Passing over from what? From a situation of non-opportunity even, to a situation of opportunity, from a situation of weakness to a situation of strength. And you know, brew is a witch's term. Now, I'm not saying this about Jewish people. Remember now, I was born into a Jewish family. I'm not saying this about, but you know they have something called witch's brew, because the stirring of the pot of the witch is taking whatever ingredients the witch put into that brew, and it's causing it to cross over from this side of the pot to that side of the pot until it all becomes mixed. And the same thing happens to language. The same thing happened to the language of Hebrew, believe it or not. And that's how you got Yiddish and these other forms of expression that are not purely Hebrew in their origin. Now, that might be a little bit too much for some people, but for those of you who can handle that, you understand. So, abra, this A here is a consonant in the same way that this H is a consonant. Whenever A is at the beginning of a word, it serves as a consonant and not a vowel. If it comes in the word, like abra, this A, this second A is a vowel. Ka is a vowel. That CA, that A in ka is a vowel. That DA, that A in DA, a vowel. That RA, that A is a vowel. But if it comes at the beginning of a word, it's a consonant to be pronounced from the deep recesses of the throat. Abra, abra. So abra is the same as habra, which is where you get Hebrew. It's the same word. Abra and Hebrew are essentially saying the same thing. So if abra means I speak, then Hebrew means the speaking. But it's not just any speaking. It's a speaking that includes multiple levels of frequencies that are designed to induce multiple levels of effects. Now, I'm not talking about your standard Jewish person who is speaking language, reading from the Torah, speaking to each other in Hebrew as we know standard Hebrew. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about now a much more sophisticated level of Hebrew that we have not generally been taught about. We're talking about Hebrew as a concept for how language is manipulated in the world. Abra, I speak. The words we speak are frequency modulators. They go into the ears of people and they are intended to have a particular effect intellectually, emotionally, and spiritually. Abra means I speak, and therefore I create. But let me show you another little secret in the language. Now, ka is actually the Hebrew letter kof. In Arabic, we would say kaf. Kaf literally means hand. Hand. So how does this make sense in this particular statement? The hand amongst the ancient Semitic people was a symbol of that which is equal to something else. In the same way that this hand is equal to this hand on the most part, this was or is the most ancient way of weighing things. So before they invented scales for weighing your goods, when you would go to the market, you would go to the market and you would pick up a certain amount of whatever it was that you were looking to purchase. And you would weigh it against something else that you were comparing with the object or the product that you were looking to purchase. And if this was heavier than that, then you knew it was worth more than that. Or if this was lighter than the other thing, then you knew that it was not worth as much. This was the most ancient way of weighing things. It's not the most accurate way, but it is the most ancient way. And therefore the hand became a symbol of weights and measurements and comparing things to other things. So ka means compared to. So abra, I speak, and my speech is going to be compared to whatever dabara means. Dabara, and dabara in the Hebrew language means I create. I create. So that means that whatever I am speaking, the equivalent of it is going to manifest after I speak. It's the same principle upon which Allah gives us in the Quran the phrase kun fayakun. Be and it becomes. Allah says that He says kun fayakun. It's speech from Allah. Kun, I speak, fayakun, and it becomes. So kun fayakun is in the Quran to explain this ancient Hebrew term, but with more specificity, because kun means something different than abra. Abra means I speak. Kun also means I speak. But when I speak, I'm instructing these energies that I have created. This is Allah speaking. I've instructed these energies that I have created to become a particular thing based on the vibratory rate and tone that I'm establishing. That's Allah speaking. So it's not just randomly speaking, it's speaking with a particular purpose. What is the purpose? That what I'm about to bring into existence, still Allah speaking. What I'm about to bring into existence, I am also imbuing it with the ability to replicate itself over and over and over. How do you know that, Instructor Bilal? Because of the word kun and the letters that are being used. There's that letter K again in kun, the letter kaf, but it's followed by the consonant nun. So if we look at just the consonants in that word kun, take the U out of it, it's KN. Everywhere you see the combination of KN, it's talking about the replication of a life form, the furtherance of that life form. K represents the hand, and nun, the letter N, represents the seed. So it's the hand's seed, or it's the hand containing the seed. That's what the farmer does. Before produce can be brought into being, the farmer first has to have seed in hand. You get it? The hand has to first contain seeds that then do the job of being planted, and eventually he's going to get, or she's going to get, a farm that life form, the oranges, the lemons, whatever they're growing is going to be replicated, and it will contain future seeds for future replication. Isn't that much more clear than just abra, I speak? In the very subtle way that language has of expressing itself, abra means I speak, and it means that also my intended goal is to replicate this frequency. To replicate this frequency. How do you replicate a frequency? By repeating it over and over again, just like the seed contains the seed, contains the seed. And for as long as that fruit or that vegetable continues to appear, it's going to contain its own means of replication. Abra is different. Speaking doesn't necessarily contain anything that you're going to repeat, especially if you're not interested in or if you can't remember it. So the key in abracadabra is to repeat that speech over and over again. You see the difference between the way Allah does something in his fitrah and the way social manipulators do things? They'll call you a nigger, for instance, excuse the expression. And there's nothing in the fitrah to support that concept. So in order to have it replicate, they have to repeat it over and over and over again. In repeating those concepts to you over and over and over again, it's the repetitive nature of that same thing being told to you that actually serves to hypnotize you on the subconscious level. And the subconscious level is your real mind, not this conscious mind. This conscious mind is designed to connive and to control and to do all of those other things that you think you need to do in order to make further progress in the world. But it's the subconscious mind that is 90-something% of the actual mind. And what you have repeated to you consciously over and over again will find its way just based on the repetition of it. It will eventually find its way into your subconscious mind. That's the key to influencing the human being's subconscious mind, to repeat something over and over and over again. It then leaves the subconscious mind and becomes locked in what they call the memory bank. Once information leaves the conscious mind and seeps into the subconscious mind, into the memory bank, the subconscious mind does not know the difference between truth and lies, and it accepts everything as true. I guess it says to itself, if he kept listening to this thing over and over again, it must be real. It must be the truth. So the subconscious mind, the greater portion of your mind, accepts everything that ends up entering into it as the truth. Now you might say, well, shouldn't the conscious mind, shouldn't the subconscious mind know better than just to ignore? As long as you repeat it over and over again, the subconscious mind will accept it as truth until it somehow learns out of it or learns differently. I'm giving you this kind of detailed information, and I'm hoping you're understanding it, because this is the systematic way that social manipulators have of entering human consciousness and also entering the subconscious portions of our human brain. So you keep giving attention to something, that information is going to eventually end up in your subconscious storehouse of memory. And the subconscious mind, another important thing to understand, is that it operates not based on the intellect and rational thinking, figuring things out rationally. Once it is in the subconscious mind, the emotions become in charge of it. Your emotions, how you feel about particular things. So unless you have a really sharp conscious mind that's able to catch these things that are being repeated to you and ward them off, defend yourself from these ideas, from these concepts, from these words, from these frequencies, unless you're on your game like that, then most of what is being repeated to us through media, social media, through the commercials, through the posters, through the music that we hear, the things that we hear repetitiously. This is the reason why radio programs and whatnot play these videos and play these music, these songs and so forth over and over again until you memorize them. Once you memorize them, they're in your subconscious mind. And you notice that songs that you learned 4 decades ago, you still know them. As soon as you hear it, you can repeat every word, you can sing every note. It hasn't gone anywhere. You haven't paid attention to it in 10 years, but as soon as you hear that beat, you know that's whoever. That's my song. You know how we do, right? That's my song. But you haven't heard that song in 25 years since you graduated from high school. Yeah, but that's my song. I can tell you every word, every beat, every musical lick, because it's still in the memory bank. All right. So let's push forward. I think that's enough of that.
Instructor Bilal,
Yes, ma'am.
is that not a reason that we need to get together and make sure that what we're teaching our children is the truth, because that's the same, we're putting things in their memory bank also.
Yes, ma'am. The first thing that we need to really give our attention to is
Yes.
what is the truth?
Okay, right.
Now, I'll explain what I mean by that in just a little while, or you'll remind me.
Yes, sir.
Most of us have not been introduced to proper information. Most of us, and I'm speaking to Muslims now, particularly. We believe, since we read the Quran and we know some things about the life of the Prophet Muhammad, etc., that we have the truth. But that truth that you're thinking is the truth that you've been taught is not the truth that Allah is speaking of in the Quran when he gives us the term al-haq. You'll remind me to speak on that before we conclude, okay? All right, so I'm going to push forward with the rest of this dialogue and we'll open up for some questions. Now, remember, this is a continuation from last Wednesday. Let's begin with a few verses from Surah 91, beginning with ayat or verse 7. And the name of this surah is Ash-Shams. And Ash-Shams means the sun, S-U-N. And in this surah, Allah is comparing the sun, S-U-N, with the soul, S-O-U-L, called nafs, N-A-F-S. For anyone who's new, don't worry if you're not understanding this. It will be available as a replay, and you can play it enough times until it seeps into your memory bank as the truth. So the soul, and isn't it interesting that in Latin, the word for sun is S-O-L, soul? Sounds exactly like S-O-U-L. That should tell you something. Because they learned a long time ago that the human soul operates in the same basic way as the S-U-N, the solar disk that we have up in the sky, as they say. So Allah says, "Wa nafsin wa ma sawaha," by the soul and the proportion and order given to it. That's what sawaha means. From the same root word as the popular word uswa, which means to be balanced in your nature, in your fitrah. So Allah is saying that the soul has been given its own proportion and order that allows for the human life to become and remain balanced. And we talked about that balance last time we were here and spoke about the human being being created in the most excellent balanced, the most excellent balanced modality. And it's from that same concept. Taqweem, qawm, standing with balance. The soul has been created also to respond to balance. Everything in creation actually has been created upon the platform of balance, whether we're talking about a bowl of water, which seeks its own level. The water always seeks its own level. That's why you have waterfalls and all of these other manifestations of water on this earth. If they're moving, if the water is moving at all, it's moving towards equilibrium. It's moving towards the establishment of balance. So if that's true for the water out there, it's also true for the water in you, the metaphoric water in you, called your moral sense, called your sense of decency, your sense of honor, your sense of cleanliness. All of these things have been created by Allah to seek its own level and its own balance. When you're not balanced, you don't feel right. If you make a misstep, you don't feel right. If one leg is shorter than the other, you don't feel right. If you have to hop along, it's not as comfortable as walking evenly on two. And Allah tells us that in the Quran also. So when your life is correct and when your life is ordered, your nature knows it. When your life is disordered, And when you're giving yourself to things, to ideas, to thoughts, and to feelings that are creating an equal and a disequilibrium in you, you're going to know that also. Allah put it in your nafs. He put it in your soul to know that. You don't have to wait for the sheriff to tell you you did wrong. As soon as you do wrong, you pretty much know, geez, I did wrong. That was a crime, wasn't it? You know, that was a bad thing that I said or did. You feel it in your soul. Allah created the soul to respond to goodness, is what's being said here. The next ayah says, فَالْحَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا. Still talking about the nafs, the soul, and its enlightenment as to its wrong and its right. So the soul has its own built-in proclivity for what is wrong and for what is right. And the Imam W.D. Muhammad has made corrections on these kinds of translations when it comes to the word fujur. Fujur is related to the word fajr. And all of us know that fajr is when the sun begins to break, meaning when the light of the sun begins to manifest in the sky. That's called a fajr. That separation of the darkness based on the oncoming light or the incoming light, that's called a fajr. Fujur has been called evil in some cases. Here it's being called wrong, but it's not really wrong. See, this is a moral judgment. You can't place a moral judgment on creation per se, on the objects in creation, the mountains and the grass and all. You can't place a moral judgment. You can't say they're doing something wrong. All right. The most you can say is to give us a description of that particular thing in the creation so that we can then extract out of it a moral supposition or a moral position. So because it represents darkness mostly, and that first introduction of light is designed to eventually separate the darkness from the incoming light. Because it is still mostly dark, it's not evil, it's just more prone to negative things happening and to evil people who will use that overriding darkness to support whatever their scheme is in the dark. I hope you understood that. The fujur itself, as the first emanation of light coming from a rising sun, that's not evil. What people do in that level of darkness, that can be evil. But the soul has no evil component attached to it. The soul has been created for righteousness' sake. What human minds do in relation to the weakness that the soul manifests when it is not fully in the light itself, that is what we're translating, or what they are translating as wrong or evil. And it's given as taqwaha, the rightness of the soul, taqwaha, from the word taqwa. All of us know that word. It's a particular level of consciousness that dawns in the intellect. See? So the soul has the propensity to remain in darkness if it is not concentrating on accruing more and more information, correct information. But if the soul is negligent of what it is being called for, that's why Allah gave you curiosity. But if you don't exercise that curiosity, if you sit back and you just let the world go by and you don't ask questions about anything anymore, like you used to do when you were 3 years old, 5 years old, you used to ask questions about everything. But as soon as you get into school, somehow you become dumbed down. That's a part of the spell casting that we're talking about. Sometimes our own parents make us feel bad about asking questions. Why are you asking so many questions, Father? You know, that kind of thing. The next ayat says, Qad aflaha man zakkaha. Truly he succeeds that purifies it. So the purpose of the soul is to accrue more and more purification. You thought zakah was just giving 2.5% of your annual earnings to the masjid? That's not what zakah is at all. There's no 2.5% of giving anything that's prescribed for us in the Quran. Men made that concept of zakat up so that they could keep those coffers full. And along with the coffers, sometimes they end up keeping the kafirs full of their dough, of their money. Allah says in the Quran, to give for sure, but to give what is over and above your means. So for the millionaire, that's going to be maybe a lot of dough, but for the poor person, no, you don't have to give 2.5% of your earnings. You got the Christians who are encouraged to give 10% of their earnings, or that's not prescribed in the Quran for Muslims. You give whatever is above your means. This way, you are responsible for calculating the worth of your annual income or your daily income, or whenever the harvest comes in, if you're on the farm, 2, maybe 3 times a year. You have to calculate what you are able to part with, and you have to be honest about it. That's why it's also called a sadaqah, which means he was truthful. We say Sadaqallahul Azim, Allah has spoken a mighty truth. Sadaqah is also truth as well as what you give. And if you're not giving truthfully, if you know that you could have given more than that, even if you gave $1 million, but you knew you could have given $10 million, according to Allah, you have not given sadaqah because you were not truthful. That's another gem from Imam W.D. Muhammad's Language and Logic. So truly he succeeds. What's the name for succeed? Aflaha. In the adhan that they give you, it says Hayya ala salah, and then Hayya ala falah. Aflaha, falah. Come to success. Truly he succeeds that purifies it. But what kind of success is Allah speaking to? Falaha and falah, these terms are speaking to the success that farmers come into after planting seeds, after taking care of the soil and making sure that it has proper sunlight and proper watering from the rain and so forth, and making sure all of the things that will disturb the life of that vegetation become nullified. Creatures that might eat into your plants and that kind of thing, steal your fruits and that kind of thing, you deal with that so that when the harvest comes in, you have what it is you prayed for. That's falah. So what is Allah saying? He's saying that the soul is like the soil, which I've been telling you for years. Those words are not that close in sound and pronunciation and spelling in English. They're not that close for no reason at all. Soil, S-O-I-L, and soul, S-O-U-L, are basically the same concept. You plant things into the soul that you want to grow into that which is going to assist you in the future. So all of those things that are going to eat away at the life of that vegetation or those fruits and whatever else you're trying to grow, you're supposed to be on guard against those things that are going to cause your crops damage. Once you've done that job, then Allah does the rest by giving you the falah, the success. But it's the success, I repeat, that the gardener or the farmer experiences. It's not just any success. It's not success based on what you inherited from your rich grandparents or your rich parents. That's success in your individual pocket, but that's not falah. Falah is success that is the result of your individual hard work. And that's what the soul is about. You cannot inherit anybody else's righteousness who came before you. You can only grow into a successful soul if you yourself are paying what? Attention to the needs of the soul. Let's continue. Lastly, Allah says, وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ دَسَّاهَا, and he fails that corrupts it. He certainly fails. The one who allows it to become corrupt, allows what? The soul. So you will be responsible for allowing your soul to enter into this non-fitra based cesspool of issues and problems. When your soul becomes corrupt, you can't charge Allah with that corruption. When the soul becomes purified or remains purified and increases in purity, Allah is the one who gets the credit for that. If your soul slips backwards into darkness because you are not on your P's and Q's about what you allow into your ears, your eyes, and so forth, then you are charged with that crime. I hope we're understanding. He fails that corrupts it. And I mentioned in the last class that this word dassa, dassaha, dassa, means to be buried to the point where what was buried becomes putrid. And in time, it will actually become unrecognizable. You dig up that dead body from 100 years ago, you're not even sure whether it's a male or female. You have to look more closely. You're not sure what ethnic group it belonged to, unless you're just good like that. Most people are not. So when things become spoiled, remember spooled, the spoiled, the spilled, the spelled, they become in time unrecognizable. When your computer is just spooling, you can't recognize any website until it stops spooling. Milk becomes spoiled. You make a mistake and you go and chug a carton of milk that's been in there for 2 months. You didn't realize it was in there for that long, and this creamy, buttery substance that's not milk to you. It's spoiled. It becomes unrecognizable as what you know to be milk. Now, we're going to get into some of the dynamics of NuNetics and what that has to offer. If you're not familiar with the term NuNetics, it's simply the the study of individual Arabic letters, understanding that each letter has its own unique meaning. And most people, you'll be hard pressed to find anybody who's learned Arabic who learned it letter for letter. They learn it root word for root word, which is fine if you really don't care about original and etymological meanings for Quranic words. If you really don't care where this word came from, how it got into the lexicon, etc., if you don't have that level of curiosity, don't worry about NuNetics. It's not for you. But if you have that level of curiosity, especially understanding that the science of NuNetics is an inheritance, especially for the so-called African American people, the Bilalian people, if you will. This is our inheritance. The first thing that was taken from those who came across the oceans, the Atlantic, for chattel slavery, the first thing that was done is that those people were divided from each other so that they would not be able to speak each other's language and communicate with each other in their native tongues. In some cases, the physical tongue itself was pulled out of the mouth of the African. That was as a punishment for you communicating messages in your native language with other people who shared your native tongue. So wouldn't it be justice on the part of Allah to return to us first the first thing that was taken from us? That's justice. They took our tongues. Allah's returning our tongues, but he's doing it on a level that even surpasses where this world has gone in terms of their understanding of language. They teach languages based on root words. I repeat, based on root words. In Arabic, trilateral or triliteral root words, kataba, salaha, etc. NuNetics has discovered a way of teaching words based not just on root word meanings, but how those root words got their meanings. They got them based on the meanings of the individual 2 or 3 letters that were put together to form the root. So it wouldn't just be kataba means book, it would be ka, that letter kaf means something. That letter ta means something. That letter ba means something. And when you put all 3 of those meanings together, they don't just form a word, they actually form a sentence, because the letter is already a word. I told you the letter ka or kaf means hand. You see? So once you know what they mean, and you know all of the inferences that go into that particular part of the body, in this case, when you string them together, you're going to get a cogent sentence. The people who originally formulated this Arabic language, they knew that. That's why one trilateral root word means something completely different than another one that has 3 other letters. Who made up these meanings? That's what NuNetics was in search of, and Allah blessed us to find it. Because that same system exists in other related languages. It even exists in English, but again, that's not what they want. That's too much information for the average one of us as far as the social conspirators are concerned. Because once you know what their letters mean, once you know most of the things that they are implying or inferring, then you begin to grow upon the same knowledge base that the ones who are trying to manipulate you are growing upon and have grown upon, and share with their children and grandchildren that they never, ever planned on sharing with you. They didn't have to. Allah gave it to us directly, and it's a wonderful thing. We say Alhamdulillah for that. Now let's look at this suffix ha, H-A, in the transliteration, H-A, ha. These are very important signatures in the Arabic language. As a suffix, ha indicates feminine gender. If it were hu, H-U, it would then indicate masculine gender. But in as much as it represents feminine gender that's being referred to here by Allah, that's ha. And notice that Allah uses that ha all the way through here, right? So ha, that's feminine for the soul. What taqwa ha, still referring to the soul. Zakah ha, still referring to the soul and its purification. And nasa ha, which is where we are now, still referring to the feminine soul, not the female soul. There's a difference between female and feminine when we are discussing linguistics. Female is the gender, male, female, whereas feminine, masculine is referring to a principle of operation. So when we say the feminine principle, which is what we're discussing now, and I'm going to change this, I should have caught this, it's not referring to the physical gender, it's referring to the feminine principle. All right, soul, nafs, operates under a feminine principle. What does this mean? In giving the nafs the suffix ha, this means that it can be influenced by an outside agent in the same way that a female can be influenced by a male. So a male can approach a female and eventually end up copulating with her and leaving within her his male germ called sperm. And the sperm operating within the interior of the female will eventually produce a new life form that she has the burden of carrying, not he. She has the burden of carrying. So he was the agent that deposited his male sperm into the female, but she has the burden of carrying it. So she needs a particular level of protection that he does not warrant. That's why the women are to be protected. In language, it operates on the same basis. That is that if a word is given feminine principle in the Quran, it means that that word that is being spoken of needs to be protected in the same way that a female needs to be protected in the presence of a male. What do we mean by male? We're talking about language that is aimed at you, like the sperm is aimed at the ovum. It's aimed towards the ovum. It goes out in search of. That's what the sperm does as a masculine principle. The feminine principle is a receptor. It takes things into itself like the female does. This, again, happens in language, in its masculine, feminine, principled words and frequencies. So if nafs, meaning the human soul, is given feminine principle by Allah in the Quran, it means that that feminine principled thing that Allah is speaking to merits the same level of protection against invaders from the outside, masculine principled invaders that the female deserves. And I think that's easy enough to understand. The glyph of this letter Ha, which you see here on the left side, is a pictograph. A pictograph is just a fancy word for picture writing. It's a glyph of a person waving in order to get someone's attention, the word that we began with. This person here waving is exactly what this glyph is based upon. The waving hand that is intending to get someone's attention. Now, in Arabic and Hebrew, this letter also represents a window. Unusual sights and sounds will usually draw our attention towards the window. The window is also sought when we are in need of fresh air. Now, why am I introducing all of these variables into this one letter? To show you how deep the linguistic science of NuNetics actually is, and to show you what some very sophisticated language manipulators have been holding over the heads of the masses of people on this earth for actually more than a few thousand years. The ancient Egyptians had this knowledge, and they left that information on the walls of ancient Egypt, on the pyramids, etc. And the European world is still trying to decipher it based on their Rosetta Stone. They still are not able to capture all of what those meanings are off of the walls of ancient Egypt, not even with their most sophisticated tools of translation. But guess what information is actually necessary to even unlock the symbolism of the letter system and the words that are portrayed on the walls of ancient Egypt. Guess what system in the world right now, and that's the only one that I know that actually has the keys to unlocking ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs. Can anybody guess what that is?
NuNetics. NuNetics.
No, take NuNetics out of it. There's a clearer key.
I think it's the innocence of NuNetics.
Take NuNetics out of it. Pretend NuNetics doesn't exist. What system of knowledge is in the world, has been in the world?
Picture, nature, signs in nature.
Well, yeah, but there's a a better way of introducing this key. This, if I call it a book, you'll get it right away.
Picture?
No,
Al-Kitab.
yes,
How come?
the Quran itself. You see, we have been so duped out of what the Quran actually is. And unfortunately, we've been duped out of what the Quran is by our present body of Muslim scholarship.
You talking about the Quran?
Yeah, I'm talking about the Quran.
And
All right, close your phones back up. Close your phones back up. We're definitely talking about the Quran. The Quran is so far ahead of where this world is, it would make your head spin if you knew. I only know a little bit about it. It makes my head spin every time I think about it. Imam Muhammad made that announcement once. He said that the Quran is so far ahead of this world's sciences. There's information in the Quran about sciences that have not even been discovered yet. We go into the Quran looking for stuff that's already been told to us and trying to verify it. Oh, see, the Quran speaks about that too. But the Quran, you see all this new technology and all this other stuff that people are coming into, the Quran, all of that is in the Quran. Cyber stuff. You'd be surprised what's in the Quran. I'll probably introduce that to you in semester 18. I did a few, maybe 1 or 2 classes on it, I think in semesters 15 or 16. And I felt that most of you weren't ready for it, so I didn't continue. You'd be surprised what's in the Quran. Even future events. We think the Quran is all about what happened in the past. Much of the Quran is about what is going to happen in the future. And if you understand it and can digest it, that information will let you know that humanity is not this one big mass of condemned people by God, as religion presents humanity. The majority of them are disbelievers. The majority of them are wicked transgressors. These are the translations that have come to us by the traditional Muslim scholarship. And I'm telling you that maybe 85 to 95% of their translations are incorrect, because they translated the Quran into English and these other Western languages through the prism of the Persian language, not the Arabic language. And that, my friends, is the main problem with how we, and the rest of the world for that matter, now view the religion of quote unquote Islam. They substituted Persian words and meanings for original Arabic words and meanings. So you can almost take the average Arabic word that we've been taught, like mu'min, and they say, oh, believer, that's a Persian definition. That's not an Arabic definition. Believer? Why would Allah ask you to become a believer? Children believe things, it doesn't mean it's true. Some of us used to believe in Santa Claus. I never did. I was never a Christian. But some of us used to believe in Santa Claus. There are children who have fathers who are criminals. But as a 7-year-old, you think the world of your father. Not you personally, but you know the people I'm talking about, they think the world. Look at Bumpy Johnson. That little daughter of his, she thought the world of her daddy, but her daddy was a big-time drug dealer. She believed that her daddy was the best father ever produced by God. So believing something is nothing. You think the greatest thing about you in the deen is that you are a believer, and in the word itself has lie built into it. B-E-L-I-E-V-E-R. We went through this before. No. You should call yourself at best a person of faith, one of the faithful. You begin as a believer, I'll give you that, because you don't know all about this deen when you first jump into the pool. So you have to just believe certain things, because some things have been verified for you. So you say, well, if that much is true, I guess all of it is true. And you believe in this deen. But there's a point at which you're supposed to become much more sophisticated, intellectually speaking, that you can now say, I can put my total faith in this, because faith, the English word faith, is related to the Arabic word fat, F-A-T-H, and fatiha, which means the opening. Fat, F-A-T-H, means victory. So what you are investing yourself into as a deen represents your victory, and it represents the opening of so many other opportunities that were not available to you before you began to accept the truth of the Qur'an. And I hope that's understandable. Now, in Arabic and Hebrew, this letter ha also represents a window. Unusual sights and sounds draw our attention towards the window. You could be in the kitchen cooking and you hear a loud crash, and you know it's a car or a truck or something, and then you hear a voice, as you know somebody's been hit and somebody's been hurt. What do? You turn the fire off, or you put the pot on a different aisle, and you go run into the window to see if that's your baby or your son or your husband, right? Because the window then invites a particular level of curiosity. We call it attention. Back to the same word that we began with. The window is also symbolic of attention. When you're waving at somebody, you're saying, hey, I'm over here, right? You're coming out of the airport, and the person who's supposed to pick you up, they're across the street or whatever, and they start waving at you just like this glyph. Because they want what? They want your attention. So all of what we're talking about now centers around the concept of attention getting. That's what the social manipulators, the wizards of this world, that's what they are after also. They want your attention. They want your imagination, so that they can shape it in the direction that pleases them and that pleases their scheme. So if they can shape the imagination of so-called white people to believe that they are a superior race, do you know how long these white supremacists have been living with that lie? But it's a falsified imagination. If now they're trying to shape so-called Black people to believe that their Blackness is special in the world, Black lives matter, you're not understanding what they're saying by that phrase. Matter is solid material. And they're saying, really in secret and laughing at it, that so-called Black people are materialistic, the most materialistic people on this planet. That's what they're saying. You don't realize it, but people who can read that language, as Imam Muhammad was able to read it, they know exactly what that is saying, that Black people exist on the fundamental level of matter, physical expression, physical needs. They are, they gave us a phrase in the 60s, solid on that, brother, solid on that. What solid do you think they're talking about? Why did we where did we get these kinds of phrases? We don't realize that there are language manipulators who are dropping them into the public domain, so that the right people can pick up on it and repeat it over and over again as a mantra, so that it begins to influence you on the behavioral level. We don't realize that's what language does. That's how language operates. And language is another way of saying languid, which means a weak, to become a weak, languid, listless, as we said in the last class. Solid on that. The word solid is soul lid. It represents the lid that these manipulators put over your soul, so that your soul can only grow up until a certain point. We call it the ceiling. They place an artificial ceiling over your soul, so that your soul remains relegated to the materialistic, fundamental levels of development. Every soul is born into the materialistically inclined level of its development, because the baby needs material. The baby does not need a book. The baby does not need an imam. The baby does not need a preacher. The baby needs sustenance from the material world. So that's where the human soul begins its journey. It begins its development in the material world, but it is supposed to use that material world once it's established as the platform upon which to reach higher and higher for the higher aspirations for emotional development, and then eventually for intellectual and spiritual development. They don't want us up on those plateaus. They want us to remain in the material level, on the material level of stagnation, actually. So for the 2-year-old chasing after some milk and cookies, that's fine. For the 20-year-old and the 30 and 40-year-old still chasing after booty, that's limiting your development. Allah put you here for much more than that. All right, keep that in mind. All right. So the window is beckoning us towards it as an attention getter. The other reason for the window, and see, again, I'm giving you these examples so that this is just one letter out of the Fitra-based Arabic letter system, just one. You got 28 more to go. All right. Don't let it scare you. You should be so inclined to learn this NuNetics language that you spend most of your day, even at work. Once you memorize these letters, you should be trying to figure this out in your head. This letter means what else? What else does a window do? So that's how you should be thinking. What else is a person trying to do by waving at us? A lot of times people are trying to save you from danger. Isn't that true? Yo, hey, no, don't go that way. So this letter also came to be a glyph representing possible danger. Now, let's prove it Quranically. Let's just go back up to those ayats. You remember all these has at the end? In the Quran, now I'm giving you a golden nugget right now. In the Quran, when that letter ha appears as a suffix, as it does in all of these words, sawaha, wataqwaha, etc. I showed you. That ha more than likely is indicating a possible danger. And you'll see greater representations of that idea in the last juice of the Quran, the last 30th of the Quran, where the shorter surahs are. Look for those ayat that have ha at the end of them. And you'll see that it's dealing with possible danger. What's more dangerous than you losing air? People can come up behind you. We used to do it as children. Cover your eyes from the back. Don't look, don't look. And you there laughing. Hey, who's this? Who is this? Hey. Let them cover up your nose and your mouth and see what happens. You'll be fighting. You'll be throwing elbows behind you. Somebody come up and do this and your air gets cut off. That's you talking about an emergency? That's how. You get it? All right. So that glyph, I repeat, represents a person waving, trying to get your attention or trying to stave off some possible danger or emergency situation. So it's the same thing with the window. And when you lift that window, you bring in fresh air. You lift that window, you're bringing in fresh air. So that letter represents also air. The letter ha we're talking about now, not just a suffix. We just got finished talking about it as a suffix, but as an actual letter in the alphabet. The letter ha in this Fitra-based Arabic alphabet refers to breath, as well as to warm, rising air. All of us should know from our chemistry class. that warm air rises. These are all signs that are meticulously built into these letters so that when you read your Quran, you are able to infer these meanings, one behind the other. That's what's going to give you this, the richness of what these Quranic words are actually saying to us. These words have a richness that's being obscured, in some cases intentionally hidden from the majority of people. So it represents breath. The biblical name, Eve. All of us have heard of Eve. That biblical name Eve is pronounced as Heva in Hebrew. So if you're reading the Hebrew Bible called the Torah, when you get to the part that speaks about Adam and Eve, it's going to read in the Hebrew language as Heva. You see Eva, doesn't matter whether the H is there or not. Heva is Eva, is Eve. That's Hebrew. And it carries the exact same meaning. Guess who told us about this in 1975? W.D., say it with me, W.D. Muhammad.
W.D. Muhammad.
That's right. He was called a chief minister or supreme minister when he told it. That's how far back that was. In 1975, he spoke on Eve, and he said that the name Eve meant warm air. Some of you will remember that. So warm air, however, is symbolic of desires. That's another thing that Imam Muhammad told us about. And we were busy scratching our heads because the Christian preacher, when we were Christians in the church, never told us that. And it's mostly because they didn't know that themselves. That the name Eve means warm air, and that the warm air was symbolic of desires. And desires are what form the foundation of the human soul. Now we're going into some fictional-based psychology. It's my favorite subject. This is my favorite. I live with this. This is my favorite subject. Deriving fictional-based psychology from the Quran itself based on the NuNetics method. Man, there's nothing better than that. I'm telling you.
Yes, sir.
You know it. You know it. There's nothing better than this. It's wonderful. So keep your eye on these words. Desires. The serpent seducing Eve in the book of Genesis is a symbolic story of how our desires can be manipulated by what? By our instincts. In the Bible, your instincts are given in the symbol serpent. The serpent. The serpent in the Bible represents your instinctive nature. The Quran comes to explain the Bible, so the serpent in the Quran also represents your instinctive nature. The one that Musa had when he was dealing with Pharaoh, the one that he even ran from when it turned into an anaconda, it was his staff. You know what your staff is? Where's your staff in your body? Somebody open up their phone and tell me.
Spine.
There you go. See how much y'all are growing and how fast y'all are growing?
You're directional.
Well, in your body, I said. So we're talking about the human spine. And what is your spine in control of? Your human nervous system. Your central nervous system. Your central nervous system is based upon what foundation? Instinctive drives. So these are sciences that are being introduced by the Quran that Allah has given us first divvies on. Nobody else is teaching this. Go find another Muslim scholar who's teaching on the level that I'm teaching you right now about these particular things in the scripture, that what Moses was holding on to was actually his instinctive nature. And he had to let that nature go, just like you have to let your instinctive nature go. Your instinctive nature says, I need to eat. I need some sex. You know, that's all your instinctive nature saying, I need to be around here. I need to make some babies. I need to, but you got to be able to control that. So Allah said, let it go away from you. And it became an anaconda. Moving, grooving, became hayat, living, lively. And Allah said, well, no, just stretch your hand back out. I'm going to let it return to you. And you're going to use this thing in your battle against Fir'aun and his hosts. Don't have time to go into all of that. Just understand that the word serpent, sir, in this case means beneath the surface of something. Pent means 5. So it means that which exists beneath the 5. What exists beneath your 5 conscious senses? What is the undergird for your 5 senses? It's your instinctive nature. The instinctive nature. That's the serpent, because it doesn't need arms and legs. It doesn't need what the mind needs. It only needs what its nature provides for it. And that is whatever it takes to continue living and reproducing itself into the unforeseeable future. That's why it's called what it's called, a reptile. Reptile and the word repeat or repeat are from the same root, because reptiles do exactly the same thing over and over again with repetition. As I always say, that same anaconda can come and swallow a baby whole. And there's really nothing you can do about it. You can't punish the reptile and think that it won't do it again. You punish that reptile, you hit it over the head with a stick or whatever, and then, you know, and then put another infant in front of that reptile and see if it doesn't repeat that action, because it doesn't have an emotional brain. It doesn't have an intellect, a neocortex brain. It only has a reptilian brain. And the reptilian brain is designed to make sure that that life form remains in existence. It operates for the now. That's why the word serpent is an anagram of the word present, like here, right now, I'm present. Serpent, same exact letters, just interposed, present. Now, we're not coming with the sciences. You tell me what we're coming with. This is what you need. No. That serpent seducing Eve is symbolic of how our desires, hiva, can be manipulated by our instincts, the serpent, especially in the absence of Adam. Remember, Adam was put into a deep sleep, and Adam in this case represents the thinking mind, represents the same thing in the Quran, the intellect, the thinking mind. When the intellect is put asleep, then your instinctive nature is going to begin to dictate to your emotionality. That's what Hawa is, your desires, your emotions, your feelings. What I'm telling you now is common knowledge among the manipulators of planet Earth. It's common knowledge. They know this science. They know this psychology. Their entire system of mind manipulation is based on this. It's not based on science per se. Their manipulation is based on the secrets that they found in Scripture. And they extract all of the religious terminology and they represent that information in science language. So you think it's something that they discovered in science, when in fact, they discovered the science of this manipulation by studying scriptural language and terminology. That's how present became serpent, or serpent became present. You understand? So Hawa is an Arabic word that religion uses for Eve, but the name Hawa is not to be found in the Quran. A word from its same root that is found in the Quran is ahwa, which signifies low-based desires, not evil desires necessarily, unless you use those desires for evil outcomes. But low-based, meaning what I described to you in the initial foundation of the soul itself, that it has initial desires that are related to material acquisition and material satisfaction. That's fine for the baby, for the infant, even for the toddler. But when you begin to grow into your preteen years and your teenage and young adult years, and you are still solely craving materialistic things, now we have a problem. Now we have a problem. So again, by low-based, we simply mean foundational or fundamental desires. These are desires which regulate our material appetites. When these appetites become the leading force in the human life, the life becomes regressed. It's really that simple. This is wonderful. It's based psychology. When those natural or native materialistic appetites that every human being is born into, when you grow, but the appetites for higher life do not grow along with your biology, then those low-based material appetites become the leader in you. And the life that was supposed to incrementally evolve, that life becomes retarded, not clinically, psychologically, becomes regressed. You become a baby Huey. You remember that cartoon? The big old duck sitting in the classroom with all these little ducks around him. And he's sitting there, big old duck sitting there in a diaper. They aimed that as a satire against human beings, generally speaking. That's why they called him Huey. He was the human without the man part. He was Hugh, Huey, baby Huey. No man there, no mind there, just baby instincts, baby inclinations, baby motivations, baby thinking, innocent thinking. Nobody's out to harm him. They manipulated him to nobody's business. But he was Huey. That's us they're talking about. Most of those cartoons and satires are about the public. It's the elite laughing at the public on the most part. Now in Surah 6, ayat 119, Allah says, why should you not eat of, and they put meats in brackets, which means that Allah didn't say meats. How are you going to tell us it's meats and Allah didn't? Didn't Allah, wouldn't he have known how to say meats? Lahun, yeah. Or pardon me, not lahun, laham. Laham is the word for meats. Allah could have he puts it in other parts of the Quran. But see, these scholars like to infer because they want your mind to go in a particular direction. So if it locks into meats, nobody can tell you anything other than meats. If Imam Muhammad comes along and he said, this is not talking about meat, this is talking about knowledge. That you should not eat of knowledge on which Allah's name has not been pronounced. Astaghfirullah. How are you to translate Allah's Quran? And you're here, you are adding words that Allah did not put. So what they're doing is actually locking in meanings for the Quran in a way to solidify those meanings so that your mind cannot think outside of that purview. Your mind cannot think outside of those concepts. They did the same thing to scriptures prior to the Quran. That's what the whole story of Jesus and Peter in the Bible are about. It says Jesus walked on water. This is in the Bible. He walked on water. That means that water must have been pretty balanced. And he beckoned to Peter to come after him, to walk on water after him. And Peter soon sank. What does Peter mean? It's from the Greek term petra. Petra means rock, stone. If I say I lock that meaning in stone, what does that mean? I petrified that meaning. So you can't use any other meaning except the one I gave you. So what is that saying? In the Bible, Jesus is called the Word. But somebody came behind Jesus and petrified the word of Jesus. That's what Peter represents, the petrification of the word environment left by Jesus the Christ. So now when you go into the Bible, you can't tell the average Christian that when it says Jesus is Lord, that it means Jesus is God. When the word for Lord and the word for God are two different words in the Bible, but because you have not been taught Greek and you have not been taught Hebrew and ancient Syriac and all of these other languages that go into the Bible's history, you have no idea. You don't even know, I'm talking to my Christian brothers and sisters now, you don't even know that right there in the book of Genesis, the first book of the Bible, where it says God, you don't realize that everywhere it says G-O-D, it's not the same Hebrew word being used. The first time it's used, it says Elohim. The second time it's used, it says Yahweh. Another time it's used, it says, something else. But in English, it keeps saying G-O-D. They give you a little hint. When it gets to Yahweh, they say, the Lord God said. See, the first time they'll say God said. Then the second time they'll say the Lord God said. You don't see any difference in English, but in Hebrew, there are vast amounts of differences. El Shaddai. They just say the Lord, God, Almighty God. They have ways of putting it into English so that your brain can't detect it because you don't know those languages. Another value of NuNetics, you can't throw those kinds of fastballs past us. One of the things we're going to be doing going into semester 18, so be ready for it. We're going to be doing a comparative study, not an intense one, but a necessary one. A comparative study of Hebrew letters and Arabic letters. Every Hebrew letter has its own meaning also, but so does every Greek letter. You should know that. You've heard of alpha, beta, gamma. You've heard these letters, but you never stop to think that they have meanings. If they have assigned to these Greek letters different levels of cognition in the human brain, an alpha state, a beta state. They even went beyond that and they started naming these coronavirus COVID episodes that they've been manufacturing. They started naming them after Greek letters. Omicron. Oh man, the gamma. They went through all of that. It started with alpha, but it didn't become as popular as the later versions. So why would they name it these things if these words and these letters had no meanings? Their schemes are clocked into the meanings of the words that they use because the words are used for spell casting. I don't know how many different ways I can present that idea to you. Let's continue. Why should you not eat of that which Allah's name has been pronounced? When he has explained to you in detail what is forbidden to you, except under compulsion of necessity, but many do mislead by their appetites unchecked by knowledge. Thy Lord knoweth best those who transgress. Now let's look at this. Many do mislead by their appetites, meaning their desires, unchecked by knowledge. Let's look at this. What is it saying? How are they misleading? بِأَهْوَائِهِمْ, See, ahwa, remember that ahwa, desires? They're just translating it as appetites. Same thing. بِغَيْرِ ilm, unchecked by knowledge, they translate it. Inna rabbaka huwa alamu bil mu'tadin. Your Rabb knows best, or has the knowledge. He knows best those who transgress or ignore the limits. So it's right there. Ahwa'ihim, low desires. This is how they are misleading people with their spell casting. They are misleading human beings by and through the exacerbation of desires that are unchecked by the higher regions of the human soul. Now, I just gave you a fit and proper representation of what that means. You have your lower desires that are regulating your material appetites, but above that, in time, is supposed to develop higher regions of the human nafs, or the human soul, that are regulated by ilm, by knowledge. The sun itself represents knowledge, and in the development of your soul is something called the solar plexus. I'm giving you a physical station within your torus field, or within your torso. I'm giving you a physical station so that you can identify what's being said here. You have what's called a soul that's connected to the bottom of your feet. They spell it S-O-L-E. And then you have a solar plexus that's just above your stomach area, where most of your appetites are regulated. See, the solar plexus, it sits above your base appetites, your belly, your stomach. It's beautiful when you understand the science. And that solar plexus energy is where knowledge begins to form. And that knowledge is designed by Allah to put in check those base materialistic appetites that are prone to become extreme in you. So when you turn 12 and 13 as a pre-teenager or a teenager, and you begin to crave things that are not necessarily necessary for your growth and development, your mother will begin to say, you don't need that. Get you some books now. You need to be in the library, not on some computer game that's going to cost me $200 to $300. See, your parents begin to put those lower appetites in you in check. And they then become rewards for that which you are putting into place that represents your greater growth and development as an intellect and as an emotional person. Experiences that you need to become a part of that are going to help refine you emotionally speaking, so that when you get into relationships of your own and begin to want a family of your own, your soul will then be conditioned for that particular experience. But if you're still craving material things and more food and more play and more foolishness, as you become a teenager and a young adult, and you're still involved with things that 7-year-olds and 12-year-olds are involved in, then your soul has not yet reached the level of maturation that is going to be able to support higher callings and higher ambitions. And this world, I repeat, has conditioned most of us to remain on the materialistic, mundane level. And they have put an artificial ceiling on that growth so that you can't grow any higher than that for as long as you are being fed repetitiously by their language environment. So that's why they call it soul lid, solid, material. an artificial ceiling, as I said earlier, so that as the soul begins to evolve, it hits that artificial ceiling, because the language that they are feeding the majority of our public is designed to help us and contain us and keep us remaining on the materialistic level. So it becomes the lid for the soul. That's what soul lid is, solid, the lid for the soul, but it's artificial. The soul is supposed to constantly evolve until the point when death occurs to this physical body. The soul is then released, as Imam Muhammad said, to do its real job. It's contained in a prison of sorts while it's in this physical body and we're breathing this physical air. But when this soul is released at death, that's when your real journey begins. Don't look at death as something bad unless you've been doing bad. Then you got something to worry about. If you know you haven't had anything to worry about as far as being evil intentionally and just doing stuff to people that you know your soul has been discouraging in you and trying to warn you about for all of these years until it just decided to be quiet because you wasn't listening anyway, you got something to worry about when you leave this plane. Let's continue. So according to this website, this is just a little bit of information about internal and external respiration. I'm still concentrating on this letter Ha. And it says our lungs supply oxygen from the outside air to the cells via the blood and cardiovascular system to enable us to obtain energy. As we breathe in, oxygen enters the lungs and diffuses into the blood. It is taken to the heart and pumped into the cells. Listen to this process. At the same time, the carbon dioxide waste from the breakdown of sugars in the cells of the body diffuses into the blood and then diffuses from the blood into the lungs and is expelled as we breathe out. So we're taking in oxygen, good stuff, and we're breathing out carbon dioxide, the poisonous stuff. Think about what I'm saying. We're breathing in oxygen, the good stuff, and it is contributing to the overall health of the body by giving the cells what they need for survival and beyond. And then it diffuses in the blood with a return messenger called carbon dioxide. It's a poison that we have to breathe out into the atmosphere. The trees love it because they grow from our carbon dioxide, but human beings will die if exposed to enough carbon dioxide. Now, let me ask you a quick COVID question. When you walk around all day long with a mask over your nose and over your mouth, what do you think you're breathing back in? You think you're breathing in oxygen?
Carbon dioxide.
Yes,
Carbon
indeed.
dioxide.
That's right. You're breathing in toxins.
Toxin, yes.
If you pay careful attention, like many of us do, just observe. You don't have to say anything to these people. Just observe in the supermarket or wherever you happen to be, where people are hell-bent on making sure that those masks are on even outside in the fresh air. They're still out there by themselves in their cars with the windows rolled up, with a mask covering both their nose and their mouth. You can see them struggling like the Dickens. You can see the mask in and out. You are killing yourself. I'm just going to tell you straight up. You are weakening your lungs and making yourself more vulnerable to whatever might be out there waiting to get you. Because if all you're bringing in as air are the carbon monoxide molecules that you're supposed to be putting back out into the air, and not breathing into your lungs. And you're not really getting the fresh oxygen because you have your nose muffled, or as some would say, muzzled. That's what I mean by spell casting. They told us over and over again, you could die if you don't wear these masks. And through the other side of their mouths, at the very same time that they introduced the idea of the masks, they told us in their CDC reports that these masks, generally speaking, do nothing to stop particles from coming into your nose. They said the holes are too big for these minute particles. And the reason they said that they would still advocate the wearing of these masks, they said, their words, not mine, not the conspiracy theorists, no, CDC and WHO had this in their reports, that the reason they would continue to advocate masks, even though they know the masks would not work, is to make the public feel safer. What kind of bull junk is that? Fauci said it out of his own mouth that he was lying about that. And these are the people you want to continue trusting. And now Fauci is out here trying to advocate a fourth vaccine from Pfizer. Mind you, Pfizer is a company that was the least trusted pharmaceutical company on planet Earth before COVID got started. Now, how all of a sudden did they become the most trusted? They have a multi-million-dollar lawsuits against them for things that they did to people, pharmaceutically speaking. And
Yes,
now
sir.
we just want to trust them because they said, see, we trusted them because what they said was abracadabra. We speak and we create. We speak and therefore we create. So whatever we want the situation and the reality to be, all we have to do is keep saying it over and over again. Abra, abra, abra. Just keep speaking. And these dumb idiots in the public are going to believe it because we deem ourselves to be the authorities in this particular area. And when you have real professionals step forth and truthful people in the pharmaceutical industry and in medicine step forth and say, that's not the case, they cancel you. They take you off of YouTube. They shut you down. They have imprisoned people, and some people they have even murdered. You don't understand how deep this rabbit hole goes. And our dummy Muslim leadership just followed suit. Yes, sir. Take the jab. Yes, sir. Wear the mask. Yes, sir. Jumu'ah time? Oh, in order for us to open back up our masjid, all we have to do is 6 feet distance ourselves and wear these masks. We need this sadaqah. Open these doors, get the mask, man. Make sure you got a mask on. And then when you teach, some of you take it off. No, so are you contaminating me by doing that? Has anyone died or gotten sick because you take your mask off to give your khutbah? And you look at us and call us crazy. I've heard some of you imams teaching your Friday khutbahs online, calling the people who are anti-vax crazy.
Insulting.
Very insulting. So I don't have any problems insulting you back. Because you're stupid and foolish. And that's not me calling you that, that's the Quran calling you that. But you don't understand. You will one day. Because as I told you over and over again, in the language of pugilism, the fancy word for boxing, the jab is just the first punch. It's just the first set of punches. The jab is the setup punch for the knockout punch or the roundhouse hook or the right cross that's coming after it. They're just setting you up with the jab, seeing how that works. And now they're coming out with a fourth version because now they're telling you all of a sudden that the first 3 versions only work for about 30 days. This is all religious symbolism. 30 days. And that the 4th one is supposed to work for an entire year.
It's ludicrous.
I thought the first ones were supposed to work forever. They didn't tell you about the second one until you went for the first one. That's abra. Just repeat it over and over again, and you're going to go for it. It's going to become your reality. And I'm telling you, as a warning, dear brothers and sisters, Muslim brothers and sisters especially, and others, Christians and atheists, I don't care who you are listening to me. I'm telling you, if you took the first one, maybe took the second one, you better stop there. Some of it was probably placebo, but it wasn't the knockout punch that they're setting you up for as we speak. May Allah intervene. But Allah gave you a brain also, and gave you plenty of information in the last 2 years to know that you're being sucker punched. Some of you are waking up because you're saying, well, you know, how come if I got the 2 shots, I thought you said I wouldn't have to wear this mask. That's what Fauci said.
Yes.
Right? I wouldn't have to wear this mask. I could go into restaurants. Wait a minute. And then now that's not the case. I can't travel like I want unless I have the 3rd shot. Man, if you don't see that they are playing games with your dumb brain, I don't know what to tell you after today. You better wise up while you still have life in those lungs. So I'm saying all of this to say, close your phones, please, so I can continue and complete. I'm saying all of this to show you how the lungs have been designed by our source creator for an exchange. I've told you in the past that words that contain the SL sound have to do with exchange, and they have to do with the preservation of a thing's integrity. So that's what this is saying, that the air, the breath is taken to the heart and pumped into the cells. At the same time, the carbon dioxide waste from the breakdown of sugars in the cells of the body diffuses into the blood and then diffuses from the blood into the lungs and is expelled as we breathe out. One gas, meaning oxygen, is exchanged for another carbon dioxide. This exchange of gases takes place both in the lungs as external respiration and in the cells as internal respiration. So it's the exchange that this SL sound in cell is speaking to. SL sound is protecting the integrity, preserving the integrity, but it also involves exchange. So the cells, as you see, are exchanging oxygen for carbon dioxide output, right? Oxygen input for carbon dioxide output, and then breathing in more oxygen for the same process to occur within the lungs and within the bloodstream. And if I sell you something, SELL, what is that? That's an exchange. You're purchasing goods and you're leaving me with some dough, some cash, some credit card, right? That's an exchange. Every word that contains the SL sound is going to have to do with the preservation of a thing's integrity, because as you continue to buy from the seller, you are preserving the integrity of their business and also of the business relationship that the store owners have with you, the customer. So take that same SL concept into the word salah. I'm not going to go deep into it today, but it has the SL consonantal connections. So it's preserving the integrity of your spiritual relationship with your source creator. And there is also an exchange taking place. I'll leave that for your brain to figure out. You need to do some independent homework after I've given you all of the clues. Salah is also speaking to a particular level of exchange that's taking place. All right. Now, air is symbolic of our spiritual nature. Imam Muhammad told us that back in the early 1980s, probably before that. Air, that element, one of the 4 basic elements, is symbolic of our spiritual nature. And therefore, it is our spiritual nature which can also be influenced by outside agents. If Eve represents air, warm air, and air is symbolic of our spiritual nature, and that spiritual nature can be influenced by outside agents, just as Eve was manipulated by an outside agent called the serpent, then Eve represents what your spiritual nature represents. And understand also that your spiritual nature is merely the evolved station of what your emotional nature is. I'm giving you, once again, wisdom from the pages of Imam Muhammad's Language and Logic. He said that air and water are essentially the same elements transposed. The same exact elements that make up air are the elements that make up water, but they transform during the process when water becomes air. Water transfers or translates into air. And then it collects above. Once it reaches a high enough altitude and it becomes clouds, and the water begins to reappear and then rain back down, right? Hydraulics. It begins to rain back down on Earth. The air influences that water once again to become condensed, transformed once again into air. Air likes to rise, so it rises higher and higher until again it becomes formed in the sky as clouds, and the same process occurs over and over again repeatedly. So air and water basically are essentially saying the same thing when you understand it. So your spiritual nature and your emotional nature are essentially the same nature. It's just that your spiritual nature is a higher representation of the nature. So when you become spiritual, it means that you are no longer merely an emotionally charged or emotionally reactive person. Your spiritual nature is supposed to bring you into higher forms of cognition, to where when emotions begin to tug on you, hate and those kinds of emotions, your spiritual nature is supposed to know how to have them conform to better behavior. So we look at the spiritually inclined people as being higher in their development than the purely emotionally inclined people. That makes sense to me. So that spiritual nature can also be influenced by outside agents. And as you know, water can be influenced by outside agents. People throw garbage into the rivers, pollute the rivers. People pollute the air. The same thing that happens to the waters can happen to the air. If you don't receive air for a certain amount of minutes, you're brain dead. If you don't receive water for a certain amount of hours, or maybe just a couple of days, you can live without water, but it's going to take you out of here. So they are related. Imam W.D. Muhammad once described spirit as invisible directional influences. We speak of winds as being northerly winds, southerly winds, easterly winds, westerly winds, right? We speak of them as four directions, winds. Very rare that winds will be blowing in two directions at one time. That's unless you have, even then when you have tornadoes, they're still blowing circularly, but they're going directionally. They're taking things from over here. They take your cow from over there on the farm and land your cow over here on somebody else's farm, right? So winds, air is directional, but it's invisible as an influence. This is wonderful. This is how the social spiritual manipulators that I'm referring to today as spellcasters This is how they are able to cast their spells and control the masses of uninformed public sleepers. As you can see, even the word sleep with its SLP consonantal connections carries connections to the safala that we were discussing with its SFL connections. F interchanges with P as a lip sound called labial. So you have the S in sleep, you have the S in cephala. You have the L in sleep, you have the L at the end of cephala, and you have the P in sleep, which interchanges with the F sound in cephala. So essentially, they're the same word. They're going to have very similar or related meanings. And cephala means to fall. And as you know, we also refer to people who doze off as falling asleep. You see where the hidden knowledge is? Related words are slap. Well, slap doesn't mean to fall. I could slap you down, can't I? You never heard about anybody being slapped up. Man, if you say that again about my mama, I'll slap you down. I'll slap the taste out your mouth. You know how we talk to each other. Slope, that's going down. Slip, that's going down. So all of the SLP words have to do with a downward trajectory. And Allah says, لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ. We have indeed created man in the best of molds, they translated. ثُمَّ رَدَدْنَاهُ أَسْفَلَ سَافِلِينَ. You see the sa-fa-la, sa-fa-la. The lowest of those things deemed low. Things become low because they fall from their perch or their high altitude. The human being was created to exist upon a high altitude of excellence. But the social schemers, they rob us of that human excellence and take us off of that high perch and land us in the dust. Imam Muhammad spoke about the children's play yard, the playground, with its seesaw. You see that? Both of you get on even. That person's over there with their feet on the ground. You're on the other side with your feet on the ground. And then you begin to jump up and down. And while one person is all of the way up in the air, the other side has a person who is biting the dust, so to speak, crossed all the way down into the ground. Huh? And then it's their turn. And that's how the social manipulators do the society, according to Imam Muhammad. They raise one people up high. The white man is God. Jesus is God. See, they put white supremacy and white racism and all that way up here. And then as soon as they see it necessary, they take white man and the concept of being the pure race and all of that, and they send it down to be the lowest of the low. While the black man now is God. The black man now is what matters. Black lives matter. And if you're white and you have anything to say about Black Lives Matter, we're going to come after you because you're proving that you're a white devil racist. So they put this strategy happens over hundreds of thousands of years of human existence by those who have the science of manipulating human energy, how we see each other. So this is the true seesaw. They created it to manipulate human beings. This is why in this particular statement, Allah says, we have indeed created al-insan, the true human, the human being, with all of his potential, her potential, fi ahsani taqweem, in the most excellent of organizationally balanced designs. That's how the seesaw starts off, balanced. And before you know it, somebody is advocating supremacy for themselves and their people. And they're all of the way up in the air. But what goes up must come down. Spinning wheels spinning around, got to go round. Talk about your troubles. It's a crying shame. Ride a painted pony on whatever that is they have to say about that. But we know it all of that. That's about your chakras. Spinning wheels. Ride a painted pony. Horsepower. Colors. Manipulation of colors. These songwriters were geniuses. But anyway, that's off the topic. So it's the upward trajectory followed by the downward trajectory. This is mankind in history. Lastly, إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ فَلَهُمْ أَجْرٌ غَيْرُ مَمْنُونٍ. Except such as believe and do righteous deeds, should be say, except such as have faith and do righteous deeds. And you see these righteous deeds, it's in this word, وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. They always say good deeds or righteous deeds, but that's not sufficient. Amal are works or deeds or actions that you do with conscious attention paid to that work or that deed. Amal, conscious attention. See that? A-M-I-L, Amal, with an ayn coming from the back of the throat, letting you know that you need to exert some force into this work. Amal. You want to hear its sister word? Ilm, same letters. Ilm, Ayn, Lam, Mim. Amal, Ayn, Mim, Lam. Consonantally connected, they're sister words. Why? Because you cannot grow into sufficient knowledge unless you put your conscious attention to learning. That's why. You don't come into great knowledge through osmosis by standing next to a smart guy or a smart girl. That's not how you come into knowledge. You yourself have to put your shoulder to the wheel. Now, in last week's class, we discussed the Quranic Arabic word safala and connected its root letters sin, fa, lam with the idea of falling from a high perch or tower. We equated it also with the consonantally connected English words spill, spoil, and spell. This should be indicating a rise and subsequent fall. The letter F in fall is what indicates the falling motion. That should be the letters F and L in fall. Is what indicates the falling motion. The Fitra Arabic letter Fa is represented by the open mouth. And in order for the mouth to open fully, the bottom jaw must drop or fall. Look at the pictures attached. You should know one of these people very well. Cassius Marcellus Clay, who came to be known as Muhammad Ali. Yes, William Safford.
Your sound is the volume is going up and down.
Okay, that's something that I can't control from this end. It's just a bad, I see it also, it's giving me a signal. It's just a bad connection, a weak connection. It should get better.
Okay.
But thank you.
Mhm.
All right, we'll try and, again, that happens from time to time and there's really nothing I can do about it. If it gets worse, let me know. Thank you. I can hear you fine, so hopefully not all of you are experiencing that level of interference. Okay. So yeah, in order for the mouth to open, the top lip doesn't move. It's the bottom lip that has to fall. It falls. That's the letter Fa in the Arabic letter system. It means the open mouth. It also means that which separates or splits. So when this mouth jaw drops, the mouth or the lips split in order to reveal what is inside of the mouth. If you plant a seed in the ground and the plant pushes up past the clods of dirt and the tender leaf begins to manifest, that's the same as your mouth opening and your tongue being stuck out. That's also Fa. That's why Fa is the first letter in words like Felak. Qul a'udhu bi rabbil falaq, and we call that dawn, because dawn is the beginning of the separation of darkness and light. The same for the word Fajr. It begins with Fa because it represents basically the same idea of the separation of the light from the darkness. So it is anything that splits open to reveal that which is beneath it or inside of it. That's Fa. Take that meaning and apply it to other Quranic words that you know that begin with that letter. You can think of some before we conclude here and give them to us when we conclude. The word fall, this is English again. The word fall, F-A-L-L, is consonantally connected to the words fail, fool, foul, fill, which means you have to begin at the bottom of the glass or whatever it is you're attempting to fill. Full, same thing. You have to begin at the bottom before it can become full. Fuel, same thing. If you're out of gas, you have to begin at the bottom of the tank. And file, as in filing things down like your toenails, right? You file things down. All of these English words have to do with things which lose, which lessen, or which diminish. When you file your nails down, they become less and less. And I have the wrong lesson here. Let's make that correct. I think it's correct now. Now, the fitral tendency in all life forms is to increase in importance and worth. That's what all life forms strive to do. Increase or improve in importance and worth. The baby cow that is born, for instance, has to grow to the point where it is able to have babies herself and also provide milk. That's when the cow is seen in her excellence. But that's a growth process that it has to go through. It's not born into that excellence, it grows into that excellence. That's the fitral tendency in all things, even the tree, the sapling is born, and it has to grow into its excellence where it is able to give back fruit and seeds. The cycles and vicissitudes of life cause things to perish and lessen in value. So as things get older, they push past their prime for giving. Then they begin to lessen in terms of their excellence and value and contribution. The letters S and K are interchangeable. For example, circle is really SK, circle, like S-I-R-K-L-E instead of C-I-R-C-L-E. The letter C in English is a trick letter, which can't be found in any other alphabet to my knowledge. It's placed in English because it is a symbolic letter, and we won't go into the meaning of it tonight. Suffice it to say that it is speaking to the hierarchy of leadership and secret society people who know exactly what the C means. It's the reason why they call the hierarchy of the Catholic Church the Holy See. They spell it S-E-E, don't they? They don't spell it S-E-A. They say S-E-E. Because they are the ones claiming insight into scripture and into society. So therefore, Safala will be at least remotely related to another Quranic word, falaka. Falaka, and I'll show you this very quickly. Falaka means to become round, anything circular. To persist, to persevere, is the root letters for the Ark in the Quran, Noah's Ark. It's the place of the revolving of the stars, the celestial sphere, the vault of heaven, the firmament. So you can see it's dealing with spheres and circlings and circuits, going to and fro in a state of commotion, whirl of a spindle. Isn't that what we said spooling was? So they're not going to have exact meanings, but they're going to have related meanings. Now you might say, well, I'm not clear on how you got from Safala to Falaka. It's because you may not have heard me say that the S in Safala interchanges with the K. So what was originally Fa, La, Sa, or actually Sa, Fa, La, is now Fa, La, Ka. Fa remains the same as in Sa, Fa, La. The Lam remains the same as in Sa, Fa, Lam, or La. But the Sin, the letter S, has been interchanged for K. As I stated, S and K are interchangeable. S, K. Now that's a little bit more sophisticated than most of you can handle. Suffice it to say that another very important part of connections in NuNetics is opposite sounds. So the K is a guttural that is pronounced from the back of the throat, whereas the S is a whistling fricative that is pronounced from the front of the mouth. Front of the mouth for s, and back of the throat for k, k, k. These opposites have also taken on related meanings. So as you can see, falak matches meanings almost perfectly with the word spool. The S interchanges with the K. Don't worry if you don't understand this right away. Listen to the playback. That's for you to study. If you want to get this, you will. The S in spool interchanges with the K in falak. The P in spool interchanges with the F as a labial or lip sound. And the L in spool is connected to the L in falak. See, if I don't show you these sophisticated connections, you won't have an appetite for this. If I give this to you like you give information to a grade schooler, you won't think there's really anything to this. What I'm attempting to display before you are connections that are intended to spark curiosities that you didn't even know you had related to language, because we've never been given this kind of attention in school or in academics. So falak and spool are basically saying the same thing. Now back to the word fail, F-A-I-L. The word for soul is nefs, which refers to the breathing intellect. The nefs is a combination of the spiritual nature and the intellectual nature. Let me repeat that. The nefs that is translated into the Quran as soul is a combination of the spiritual nature and the intellectual nature. Let's see how. Nefs is a combination of the letters nun, fa, Seen. Let's look at what each one of these letters mean. Nun is connected to the nose, and it represents normal breathing. Right now you're breathing, and you're doing it on the unconscious level. You're not paying attention to the fact that you are actually breathing and it's keeping you alive. You're not thinking about it consciously. You can think about it consciously. You can even measure it and time it. But eventually that activity has to go back to the unconscious promptings of your instincts to keep you alive. They keep you alive. So Allah put that in your unconscious mind. Because if he had relegated it to your conscious mind, most of us would be dead within an hour trying to regulate our own breathing. So the Nun represents normal breathing. Fa represents the open mouth, as we discussed. And the open mouth, as far as that same air is concerned, represents emergency breathing. If you see somebody breathing through their mouth, they have a problem. Either their nose is stopped up or something went wrong to the point where they can no longer breathe through their nose, or it's not sufficient what they're getting through the nose. And they have to then, that's emergency. Through the nose, non-emergency, normal breathing. Through the mouth, fa, emergency breathing. Seen represents the teeth chewing. Look it up in the Lane's Lexicon Dictionary. The teeth as they chew, and as the teeth chew on food, that food serves as a cleansing agent for the teeth, just like miswak in the Middle East. They use that tree branch to brush their teeth. They chew on the miswak. So it represents the teeth chewing, and the teeth chewing make the teeth bright. That's why the letter seen produced the English word sun, S-U-N, and the brightness of the sun. And you know, we have it in our language. If we call one of our children bright, we're talking about the intellect. So seen came to represent the human intellect that's processing information. In other words, when the intellect is chewing on information, regurgitating that information, rethinking that information, processing that information, that's what is responsible for the intellect to becoming bright. That's what seen represents. And this is why the nafs represents the breathing soul, because the soul also has as a component not only the spiritual makeup, but also the intellectual makeup. Your soul is not just spiritual. Your soul is a combination of the spirit and also the intellect, as per the wisdom of Imam W.D. Muhammad. He's the first one that I've ever heard mention that, and I've heard people mention something similar to it after I heard him say that. But he's the first one that I heard say that your nafs, your soul, is not just spiritual or emotional, but it is also part and parcel of, or has an intellectual component built into it. And that's why Allah says about the nafs and the soul and its recognition of its wrongs and its rights. That's your intellect that does that, recognizes what's wrong and what's right, is able to process moral information. It's not just your emotions and your spirit doing that. That's the intellect, because the nafs is also having within it an intellectual component. What does intellect mean? In or internal election. That's what the word intellect means. It is the choosing of things in the mind. The internal choosing or the internal election that takes place within the mind when it's presented with options. Should I take this or should I take that? Well, let me look at what is best for my condition and situation. So the intellect is busy processing and selecting things based on what it believes is best for its situation. That's called moral thinking. So the nafs is responsible for moral thinking Hmm? Our soul fails when our energies are given to influences that work in opposition to our fitra-oriented attitudes and behaviors. So as soon as we leave our fitra-based platform, as soon as we begin to disrespect what nature has established as what is best for us, and we begin to follow artificial means to support survival and our human evolution, we begin to grab at artificial means of doing that. We begin to invert the very nature that Allah gave us, and we place material things on top of spiritual matters. And everything becomes weighed down by material concerns. They have inverted the human nature. That's why Allah had to come with the Quran and say, seek with all that Allah has made available to you your home in the hereafter, but do not neglect your share of the material world, because there were people who were becoming monks and totally neglecting the fact that they had a material nature. Allah had to remind those people, wait a minute, you can dedicate yourself to me all you want, but remember that I also created you with a material nature that's not of the devil. The devil did not create your material appetite. Allah created your material appetite. So that's that seesaw I'm talking about. At one time in history, they elevate that level of leadership that sees itself as being so spiritual and close to God that they actually don't even any longer see themselves in human form. They see themselves as sort of like angels. And they forget that they have a material human nature that needs a wife and husband and children and socialization. Though the monks, the extreme ones, they go up into the mountains. They say, I don't want anything to do with women. I don't want sex. I don't want marriage. I don't even want children. I want to work solely for God as his angel. Allah said, wait a minute. Tap him on the shoulder. Say, that's not how I created you. And then in time, they flip-flop the roles and they make the common person the overly materialistically inclined one, to the detriment of his spiritual nature. He ain't even got time to think about no God or no worship or no praying or nothing, because he's so busy chasing the dunya. He's busy chasing that dollar. So Allah has to remind him also. This is one of the many purposes of the Quran. So this is how our soul fails. When our energies are diverted towards influences that work in opposition to the nature. The more we succumb to these influences, the more the soul becomes inactivated. SL words preserve a thing's integrity as stated. And when that becomes diminished, the soul becomes vulnerable to influences which allow decomposition to set. You ever see soil when it's decomposing? You ever see soil when the moisture content has become dried out of it and it just becomes sandy? Drop a seed in that and see what happens if you don't put more moisture to replace the moisture that has dissipated. You won't get any growth. You'll get no growth. In the world, they give it to you as a satire when they give you the name Negro. It means no growth, no growth. They were talking about your soul, not your flesh and blood, not your skin color, your soul. Most souls in our day and time are suffering from this decomposition. Imam Muhammad has referred to this period in time as, quote, the great elimination of the human soul, end quote. The breathing process involves give and take. Give and take. We're still talking about the nafs and how the manipulators are able to manipulate us out of our human excellence. The soul also requires give and take. That giving in the Quran is called sadaqah, zakah. When you give breath back, air, you're feeding the environment and you're helping to keep your own system, your own lungs, and your own cells purified. Zakah, zakah. The air is the only one of the four major elements which we must share with each and every life form on earth. We don't share our water with other people necessarily. We don't share that warm campfire with other tribes in the area, not necessarily. We don't share our physical food coming up out of our physical land with just each and everybody that comes along. But it is not our choice as to whether or not we want to share the earth's air. Allah designed it so that it is the only one of the four major elements that we must share, whether we like it or not. The white man couldn't say, you niggas ain't getting no air today. He couldn't say that. Air has to be shared. It's a common element. This is wisdom that we're sharing with you tonight. Air is universal and cosmic. The soul is cosmically inclined in its ultimate expression. Now, here's the lesson in this. If you want to know how to fend off the damage that has been planned for your human soul, you have to recognize when your soul is in a position to achieve more and more excellence. You have to be able to determine what level your soul is actually existing on. Has it been deactivated? How do you know when the soul's been deactivated? When you care about nobody but you, and really not even yourself, because of how you treat yourself. You're out there smoking cigarettes and drinking wine and alcohol and cussing and fussing. You don't care enough. You don't even treat your mama right. That's how you know when your soul has been deactivated. Then you have those who care about minor kinds of emotional attachments to people and things. They love their car. Something happened to their car, they boo-hoo like a baby. Something happened to their cousin. Oh, that's too bad for that dude, man. I mean, I wish we had spent more time together. But let something run into their car. They have a hissy fit because they're only operating on the soul level to an emotional degree, to an emotional artificial ceiling that they keep hitting, and they don't go any higher than that. So how do you know when your soul is reaching its ultimate plateau? Because the soul moves from becoming water to its evolved state of air. And air, I repeat, is shared commonly by everyone on the planet. So this means that when your soul becomes graduated from its material desires, which is instinctively based, to its higher emotions, not just regular emotions, not just water, but to air principles. The higher emotions will evolve and graduate your soul into universal principles of cosmic dimension. Imam Muhammad spoke to it as cosmic man. He said we were destined to grow into cosmic beings, where we would grow even beyond the needs and desires of planet Earth. As far as whatever those desires are, as earthlings, we would grow beyond that to connect with the cosmos itself, according to Imam Muhammad. Now, that takes a lot of study to understand that, but I'm giving you the basis for that study. Universal principles is what your soul has to grow into. Cosmic dimension is what your soul. How do you know when you've arrived there? When you begin to feel concern and even love and appreciation for all life forms. And I don't just mean humans. All life forms are being respected by you. Before you eat that food, that meat, that vegetation, you understand that it's a mercy from God that you're able to do so, and you thank the source creator for providing that for you, and you eat only enough to live to see another meal, not to become gorged or whatever the word is, gouged or whatever the word is for overeating. Yeah, and throwing away stuff at the end of the meal. He's scraping stuff into the garbage basket. You don't believe that? I know you believe it, but watch what people do during the Ramadan.
Glutton.
Pardon me?
Glutton.
Yes, glutton. I knew it was a G word. Yeah, they become gluttonous. Watch. You should be using this Ramadan to gain deeper insight into how the religion of Islam has been manipulated outside of its fitrah boundaries. What we are practicing, even as the so-called month of Ramadan, is not truly what Ramadan is designed to do according to the Qur'an. Forget the scholars. If you're going to stick with Instructor Benjamin Bilal, you better bring some armor to class, or just decide to come to class and leave your feelings behind. I'm talking about those tender feelings that want to hold on to information even though it hasn't proven itself to be correct. But because a sheikh said it, or the ulama established it, or an imam told you that from the rostrum, you say, well, it must be true. He studied for me. I don't have to study this stuff. The dude with the long beard and the white thobe, he studied this for me. I don't know. What? He said I'm supposed to dress like this. He said I'm supposed to grow my beard and clip my mustache. And he said the prophet said, the prophet said, the prophet said, and I don't see anywhere in the Quran where the prophet established that. Oh, but it's in hadith, brother. But so is drinking camel urine. They say the prophet said that was good for you, to drink camel urine, camel piss. So is child molestation. They said the prophet did that with 6-year-old Aisha. Oh, but brother, he didn't have Congress with her until he was 9 years old. Well, that makes it better. Would you let your 9-year-old daughter marry some dude because he said I'm a righteous imam, or I'm a righteous Muslim and whatever, and I need a wife, maybe a second, third, or fourth wife? Can I marry your 9-year-old daughter? She looking good to me right now. Would you let that? Would you agree to that? Are you that crazy? I'm talking to people outside of here now on YouTube and places like that. Are you that nuts? You want to push the idea that the prophet married a 6-year-old Aisha, but you wouldn't marry your daughter, your 6-year-old daughter, 9-year-old daughter, 12-year-old daughter to some older or elderly man. You wouldn't do that. Why would you do that? Why would you think that God ordained that for Muhammad the prophet, when it's the people who are attempting to profit from your ignorance that established that foolishness in the hadith? You want to argue with that? Bring it. If you want that kind of religion, you people are nuts in this day and time to accept that kind of foolishness. It is retarding your human soul. It is designed to eventually eliminate the excellence in your soul. It is a trick of the master manipulator, spellcasters of this world, who are abracadabra-ing you out of your excellence. They're speaking and they're creating their reality right before our eyes. And because we are so trusting of this faction of so-called Muslim scholarship, we just give our minds and our souls and our emotions over to this foolishness in the name of it being the words of the prophet, which cannot be proven. Oh, he doesn't like hadiths. When you get your book, follow the leader and read Imam Muhammad's words. He's got about 2 pages worth of commentary on the hadiths. You'll think that what I just told you is very mild next to what Imam Muhammad said about the hadiths. I'm not going to read it for you. I'm going to wait till you get the book and surprise your own self by what Imam Muhammad said about the hadiths, generally speaking. And the people who propagated them, Bukhari and such, and Abu Huraira, and these characters in Muslim history, these liars in Muslim history. But wait until you get the book and see what your leader said about them. Then we can have a conversation about the validity of hadiths on the most part. Tell me all about the hadiths, but can't tell me what the Quran says about certain subjects and concepts. Now, the soul is cosmically inclined in its ultimate expression. That's when your soul has reached its apex, when it is concerned about cosmic matters, meaning universal matters, when it's concerned about the poor people across the ocean, as well as the poor people across the street. When it begins to design programs to accommodate the needy. When it begins to feel similar ways towards people who do not share its skin complexion or its facial and bodily features. The people who have slanted eyes or squinted eyes, and the people who have brown skin instead of dark, black, almost black skin in certain parts of the world of Africa and Asia, India, and so forth. They have very dark skin in some of these places, but I don't identify with them just because they're so-called black-skinned. I identify with them for their human worth. That's when you become cosmic. That's when the soul becomes an air quality that is recognizably shared by all human beings alike. So all of these life forms, all of these manifestations of life become one thing when they become cosmic, and they become one thing intellectually, meaning that you can discern and separate out what needs to be separated out. If it does not respect that excellence, you can do that in the intellect, and that will allow the intellect entry into the cosmic realm. Staying in the instinctive mode causes the eventual failure of the soul. So that's why the manipulators keep us in instinctive mode. They keep us surrounded by their serpent. They want you to be fight or flight people, instinctively speaking. They want you to be mostly concerned about living another day. I gotta hit a nigga in the head because my family need to eat. What about the family, the person you just halfway killed? I ain't got no time to be concerned about them. My baby's got it. See, that's that lowest level of the soul's register, the lower desires, the ahwa that we're talking about, the emotionally manipulated part of the soul. They want us on that instinctive level, because if you stay there long enough, it will mean the eventual ruin and failure of the soul. But if you choose to graduate into the higher emotional and higher intellectual registers of the soul, doing that will ensure the falah of the success that we're talking about when it comes to the soul development. We call this the supra-intuitive level of human cognition. When you reach that cosmic level, you reach the supra-intuitive level of human consciousness or cognition. It is the level which brings one into cosmic consciousness. A relative few people ever reach this level. Let me repeat that. A relative few people on this earth in any given generation ever reach that level of cosmic consciousness. It is the same level which creates, listen, it creates local prophets and universal messengers. That bears repeating. This level that we're calling cosmic consciousness, when you become concerned about all life, if you reach another planet in your lifetime, you're concerned about those people also, those life forms also, even if it's just plant life. You're concerned about the plant life on planet X. So it's that same level that creates local prophets and universal messengers. Prophets are missioned to mitigate local, or what you might call ethnic, concerns, while messengers are missioned with scriptures that address universal or human aspirations. That bears repeating. I know that hit some people in the head like a missed football. Prophets are missioned. They're called, a prophet is called a Nabi in the Quran. Prophets are missioned to mitigate local, meaning administer over, to establish law, to establish codes of behavior, etc. But for local concerns, local people, tribal people, as the prophet did with the tribe of Quraysh, etc. As a prophet, Muhammad was missioned to mitigate the concerns of his particular group of people called the Arabs, particularly the Quraysh. Now, some of you are disagreeing with that. I can feel your spirit. That's not true. Prophet Muhammad was missioned to the whole world, not the prophet part of him. Boy, I'm gonna get slapped by some of you before this is over, mentally. And I'm not talking about you in this audience. I'm trying to tell you what's about to happen once I put this up on YouTube. And as I scroll through my mental Rolodex, I can actually bring you quotes from Imam Muhammad to support this position. Something he might have said once or twice back in even the 70s that I don't think he ever repeated because he knew we wasn't ready for that level of insight. But he spoke about Muhammad as an Arab and the limitations that were on him, racially speaking, if you accept that term. But he grew into a dimension of messengership that would eventually encompass universal edicts, ethics, and other forms of human life and development. But as a prophet, look through the Quran where it calls him prophet. Oh, prophet, when Allah addresses him as the prophet, it's always some local concern that was particular to the Arab people. And see, this is why you didn't understand Imam Muhammad when he started addressing local concerns that were particular to the Bilalian people. You said, not Islam, that's not Islamic. But Muhammad did the same thing with the Arab people. That was his role as Nabi, to address local concerns. Local concerns and situations, they morph and they require updates. How the people married. When society's structure begins to change, the rules and regulations for how to govern over local concerns has to also evolve and change. So people are not living that kind of tribal existence anymore like they were 1400 years ago. Arab societies and other societies of the Middle East, they've outgrown that tribe for tribe warring faction type of existence that they had 1400 years ago. These people are multi-trillionaires now. You can't address them with the same message that they were addressed with 1400 years ago. There are other people now in the world who are on that level of societal development who need that knowledge in order to help give them an upstart in the world. Places in Africa, Eritrea, these are places that need information now that the Arabians had 1400 years ago when they were in their primal state of development, societal development. So it can be cookie cutter and placed in those areas of the world that are on that same level of social development. But there are certain parts of the human nature that are the same no matter where you are on planet Earth, that are universal, that doesn't depend on your rate of societal growth and development. The ma'ruf treatment of people, that's whether you are clinically retarded or whether you're ruling over a country. Ma'ruf, the evident, that evident behavior that is civilized and respected by sane human beings all over the planet, that's everybody who's supposed to follow that. And that was a part of the messenger message or messengership that Muhammad represented. I hope y'all are understanding me.
Alhamdulillah.
Indeed. All right. So those local situations, they change and they require constant updates while universal principles remain constant. So salah, zakah, all of those principles, those are universal constructs, because even if you made $10 a week, you still owe some sadaqah to somebody who has less than you. That's a universal principle. So now that you have trillions of dollars, Mr. Saudi or whoever, you know, how much of that is supposed to be for the poor? How much of that is supposed to be for the unestablished in the world? Are they following those rules and regulations? Or are they giving that money to Russia that should be going to poor populations of Muslims on the planet and other poor populations on the planet that are not necessarily Muslim? That's all we're saying. Those universal principles are supposed to remain constant. And this is one of the reasons why the prophet is corrected and even reprimanded in the Quran, whereas the messenger never is. Look up all of the places in the Quran that mention the Rasul, or Rasul, the messenger, Allah and his messenger. You never find Allah reprimanding the messenger by that title. Because to reprimand the messenger is to reprimand Allah's message. And the message is pure and perfect. So there's no need for reprimanding the conveyor that brought you that mail. The mailman brings you your mail. You don't scream at the mailman because there's something in the mailbox that you didn't ask for, but it's your address. Or because you thought you should have gotten something in the mail that didn't come that day. You gonna scream at the mailman? No, so you can't scream at the messenger either, because the message is pure and untainted, unsullied from the source creator of all systems of knowledge. So we'll continue with part 3, conclusion, next week this time. And at this time, I'm going to open up for just a few questions if you have them. And inshallah, we'll be ready to close for the evening. Thank you all for your time, participation, and your patience. But let's open up for questions.
Assalamu alaikum, instructor.
Alaikum salam.
Question. Tonight you were given a representation of seen, which is different from the NuNetics books. And earlier I texted you an email about the aleph, the ha, the and the dal, as earlier also you said the 4 elements, but that's not in the NuNetics book even. I was just wondering if I go in the NuNetics book, I go to aleph, I go to ha, I go to dal, it's not listed as the 4 elements as a definition of the environment.
Yeah. Okay. And I thought I sent you back an email, text message, but if not, it's better to share the answer with the group anyway. And I believe I put in a text message to you that if, and I didn't put it this way, but I'm saying it now this way. If I were to put all of the connections that I have come across for each of these letters, you wouldn't be able to carry the book. It would be that thick.
Okay.
Because the language and communication is that vast a subject. And remember also now, if you have the book NuNetics, I've always encouraged you to get its companion book, the N-word. The N-word carries the meaning of every English letter. All of these letters are related. You'll notice in the N-word that the N in the N-word also means seed, but it approaches that concept from a different vantage point. I hope you're understanding what I'm saying.
Yes.
The Aleph in the Arabic alphabet, it represents leadership. Now you might say, but I thought you said it represented the spine. Now listen carefully. You listening?
Yes, sir.
Okay. If I chop your hand off at the wrist, I've gotten rid of certain bones, right?
Yes.
If I chop off your leg, you can still find a way to make progress and walk. We've seen amputees, double amputees, who still make progress, right?
Yes.
I can take away an arm. I can take away both the arms. You still see people out there making it with no arms. Those bones have been extricated. But if I take away, I can take away a rib. You can crack a rib, right? But if I take away your spine, you can't live without it. What does that mean? It means that the spine is the leading bone in the body. And I would say that's out there. You might say, well, what about your cranium? What about your cranium? What about your cranium? But if you understand NuNetics and how it connects concept, you'll understand that your cranium is connected to your spine. It's this world that has separated out those things which Allah has ordered to be joined together. And Allah says in the Quran, curse to those who separate what Allah has ordered to be joined. Did you know that your eyeballs are technically a part of your brain also? But science, in its effort to separate everything into minute compartments, they separated the eyes and the sockets from the brain. They are naturally connected through ligaments directly to the brain. I don't know if you remember that. If you remember that movie called Mars Attacks, they had the Martians who had the big brains and the big eyes. Well, that's really how your brain and your eyes are connected. So they don't tell us that. Just like they give us the concept of the hand, but they don't connect the hand to the arm. In ancient Egypt, they do. Ancient Egypt, in the hieroglyphs, you're going to see the arms. I don't know if you can see me, but they're going to show you the arms like the football goal post, right? They're going to show it connected to the arms because they know that you can have an arm and no hand and still function with a nub, but you can't have a hand with no arm. You can have a leg with no feet and still function, but you can't have a foot with no leg attached. So when you say foot, like they give us rajal, you know, a foot or legs, whichever way they say foot. They call it a foot. Imam Muhammad called it a leg. He's the first one I heard call rajal leg and not foot. If you look in the dictionary, somebody's phone is open, that's causing a lot of noise right now. When you look in the dictionary and look up rajala, it says it speaks about foot soldiers and people who walk on feet. Imam Muhammad said, no, it means leg. And I see the logic in that, because what good is a foot without a leg? So Imam Muhammad was doing what that old song did, you know, my toe bone's connected to my ankle bone, you know, that thing. And he put all of the necessary pieces back together so that we'd have sufficient logic for understanding that particular thing that the Quran was discussing. All right. So it's the same thing. It's the same thing with these other languages. They have meanings. Like I said, we're going to begin to study Hebrew letters. You'll see what I'm talking about. They have similar meanings for their letter system. In the Hebrew language system, Aleph, A-L-E-P-H, means ox. Ox. Now you might say, well, that's not related to spine. Yes, it is. Just like your body cannot do without your spine, it's the mainstay of your spine. If the ancient farmers did not have oxen, they would have no farm. Cows can't do that work. Horses can't do that work. You need the strength of an ox, or a bull at least, to do the work in the field that's necessary for maintaining and continuing your farm. So it is theoretically connected, philosophically connected, not necessarily literally connected. So when I give an extra or an additional meaning to a letter that you don't find the meaning for as I'm giving it in the NuNetics book, it's because if I were to pack all of these connections, first of all, you'd refuse to read it. It would just be too voluminous. So I hope that's answering some of your question.
But instructor, excuse me, but I'm only talking about in the book, the second level, not the body, but the environment. I'm thinking that since we're talking about environment, then air and, you know, and fire or heat and land or
I
earth.
repeat, the connections of things that could be spoken about are voluminous. They're not just related to what I put in the NuNetics book. You had to begin somewhere.
Okay.
Now, when you get to the level where you can make the connections like I just made with the ox and the spine, most people would have no clue where to start trying to make connections between those two things, because they become theoretical, they become philosophical. You follow what I'm saying?
Yes.
If you're thinking literally all of the time, you're not going to be able to make the connection, because you'll say spine and ox, I don't get it. But if you look at what the spine does and the responsibility of the spine within the context of the entire body, then you say, now what is the responsibility of the ox within the body of that farm or that land that needs to be processed? Then you'll get it. I promise you'll get it, but you got to think outside of the box that we've been spellbound by.
Instructor, you have arms coming out of the head in hieroglyphs representing Ka.
Yes, like that. That's correct. Yeah, I gave it the opposite way. But yeah, just like that, right?
Yeah. It looks like horns.
Yeah, that's right, because it's connected to that idea also.
Yes. Assalamu alaikum.
Also,
hold on. Let me make sure the last person was finished. Was that Michael?
Sir. Yes, sir. I'm finished.
Okay, thank you. Instructor, go ready.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
Yes, sir. First, I would like to apologize to the believers, to the listeners, for not answering when Brother Hassan, Ahmed Hassan, gave his open presentation. I kept saying I was going to do it next, and for some reason or another, when next came, I froze. Well, I don't know what caused me to freeze, but I froze. But the recitation was beautiful. I pointed it again from the method, and it helped me, and it was wonderful, and I appreciated it. And second, that I want to commend you on your ability to explain in detail, brother Imam, the Holy Quran and the rationale and the logic that Imam Muhammad left for us and the world. And he himself said, the next leader after me would be one who would teach understanding. And you the only one that I see fit that criteria, brother, with the teaching of the understanding of these logic and the information that he left for the world. And I thank Allah for you. Salam alaikum.
Alhamdulillah.
Alaikum salam. Well,
what he said.
Let me say this to that, and then I'll leave it there. All of you should know by now that I've been doing this for better than 30 years. I'm not a new jack, as they would call them, right? I've been doing this for a long time. I've been doing this. I've been teaching since I was, actually since I was 13 years old. But I've been teaching professionally since I was 18 years old. And I have never, ever had any kind of inclination towards being anybody's leader. I don't need that kind of bullseye on my back. I don't want to be anybody's leader. I don't need, if you can't lead yourself by now, I'm sorry for you. I don't need, now we need other kinds of leadership, representation, representative leadership. I'm not talking about that, but I'm talking about the kind of leadership that you will lean on so heavily that you will not do the research and the work yourself. And you'll just hide behind NuNetics, and I'm not going to let you do that. Everybody that's a part of this NuNetics experience is going to have to show and prove this coming semester, semester number 18. You're going to have to show me individually, one-on-one, that you're understanding this information. And if you're not, I'm going to give you one-on-one instruction when time allows. Because I don't want you wasting your time. I don't want you wasting your dollars. I don't want you wasting your mind identifying vicariously with what I'm teaching you. I'm not the vicar. That's the Pope. That's not, I don't do that. All right. I need for you to really step up to the plate from this point on, if you haven't done so thus far, and show and prove, like many of you are doing, who I could count maybe on two hands. I'm looking at several of you. I don't want to name any of you because then I'm going to not name some and you probably feel bad that I didn't call you. But I'm looking at your faces right now. People who have stepped up to the plate over and over again, not just with praise of NuNetics, but understanding in NuNetics. If I'm going to be a leader in anything, I'll be a leader in leading you towards this method, and that's it. Don't ask me to be a leader of anything else. Don't ask me to look for recognition from other Muslims. That does not matter to me. What matters to me is that you are a leader in your own right, in your own home, in your own community. You be the leader. You take NuNetics out and do the job. I'm not getting caught up in those crossbows and putting those bullseye on my back. What I'm doing is going to naturally manifest. And the people who need to see it and who can recognize it when they see it, you're already here. A lot of you are already here. Not because I promoted myself as some leader or some imam or some great instructor or anything. I don't need any of that. You don't need any of that. All you need to do is keep teaching what I'm giving you. Now, when you get to the point where you can give me back what NuNetics is, and I say, okay, let's start from Aleph and let's end with Ya, and you can give me this letter, this letter, this letter, combinations on 3 different levels, then I will accept an invitation to be a more nationally recognized leader. But that's happening already by no effort of my own. It doesn't have to happen because there's some effort to establish a new leader or an alternate leader or the leader behind Imam Muhammad and all that. I don't know who else is out there. Maybe there's some quiet soul somewhere teaching much greater things than I'm trying to share with you. I don't know. And I ain't trying to get in a position to have to, go back and forth with people about this guy said he's the leader after Imam Muhammad. And that guy said he's supposed to be the leader. And I'm not getting into that. I'd be nuts to waste my energy on that. And you're only inviting me to do that because of your sentiment for what I'm doing. But you're not making a rational decision when you ask me to do that. It's your good, pure sentiment and the fact that you believe we need that, but it's going to happen anyway. I could die tomorrow. My son died 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. He had no promise of long life. I don't have any promise of long life. If I die tonight, what y'all gonna do with NuNetics?
Move forward, straight ahead.
I don't want to hear them words. Show me when I question you one-on-one. That'll be my proof that you are thoroughly invested in this system. And it'll be a part of your inheritance. Pass that on